Welcome back everyone, I'm Aric from Rare Candy, and today I'm going to be giving you my full set review for the latest Pokemon TCG expansion, Sword and Shield Chilling Reign. And as odd as it sounds, the set kind of reminds me of Battle Styles 2.0 in a way, where there's not really a whole lot of new gimmicks and mechanics that Chilling Reign is introducing, but rather it's just kind of expanding on what made Battle Style such a good set. We're getting a ton of new single and rapid strike cards, and also the main mascots of this set are new Pokemon never before seen in the TCG, much like with Battle Styles. And that's honestly not a bad thing. I think that was actually a really sick set, so if we're just kind of continuing with what made that set so good to begin with, that's something that's kind of okay with me, I have to say. But as usual, Chilling Reign is going to be comprised of cards from a variety of existing Japanese sets, most notably their Matchless Fighter set, as well as the Silver Lance and Jet Black Spirit sets. Though, interestingly, a sizable chunk of cards has actually been cut from Chilling Reign, presumably just to be used later in other products this year. But in my opinion, this actually kind of works out, as many of those cut cards were honestly pretty mediocre anyways. But even with all these cut cards, there's still a lot we're going to look at today. And to make things easier on you guys, as usual with this channel, I have pinned timestamps to the top of the comment section so you can easily jump to any card that you want to hear about in this set review. So I don't know about you, but I'm actually really excited to take a deep dive here into Chilling Reign today. There's a lot of stuff I'm personally really looking forward to. But before we do, of course, if you guys can, remember to smack that like button. It genuinely really does help us beat that pesky YouTube algorithm and get this video seen by more people. And also too, I want to know what you guys are thinking. Comment down below in the comments section what cards from Chilling Reign you guys are going to be looking forward to as well. But with all that out the way, let's head into the actual set review and see what Chilling Reign has in store for us. Alright guys, to kick things off, we are going to be looking at a new Beedrill card. Of course, Beedrill is a Stage 2 Pokemon. This one is going to be a single strike card, so we do have to keep that in mind. But it has two different attacks here. The first one for a Grass Energy, probably the more interesting out of the two. It says, if your opponent's active Pokemon has any special energy attached to it, it is now knocked out. And then its other attack for the same energy cost does 110, and you discard an energy from this Pokemon. So hey, on paper, Beedrill actually has a pretty high ceiling of potential because, I mean, even though it's a stage 2, just for a single energy, you can theoretically take one-shots on 300 plus HP Pokemon, so that's pretty cool, while only giving up one prize of your own. But of course, the big issue with this attack, though, is the fact that not every deck out there plays Special Energy. I know Special Energy has been a lot more prevalent in recent sets, especially since we just got a couple of really great energies back in Battle Styles. But you just have to think, well, what do I do if I go against a deck that isn't playing these Special Energies? And Beedrill's other attack, while kind of an okay energy to damage ratio, isn't really enough, I think, to compete with some of the basic energy heavy decks in the format. I mean, just think of Zacian decks or Welder decks, Eternatus, etc. A lot of the major hitters still play all basic or at least mostly basic energy, and if they see you're playing Beedrill and they do play special energy, they probably aren't going to actually put it down and play. So I just think this second attack really isn't quite good enough to build around Beedrill. So I think if you ever want to attempt to build around this card, you almost have to play this as sort of like an Aurora Energy toolbox. So in addition to Beedrill, you'd probably have to play other things like Spirit Tomb, maybe Frostlass, maybe the new Bayonet that we're going to look at in this set review as well, just to make sure you can kind of cover yourself against these other matchups. But unfortunately, I just don't think that's the most appealing sort of deck to build around. If Beedrill was maybe like a basic Pokemon or maybe even a stage 1, I think that deck idea would actually be a little bit easier to pull off. But I mean, Beedrill, it's a stage 2, so just by nature, it's not really the type of card you can splash into some sort of Aurora Energy based deck. You sort of do have to commit a good bit of deck space to this card that is kind of worthless in a lot of matchups, despite being really strong in others. And another thing is that even though it's a single strike Pokemon, it really doesn't benefit too much from the single strike sort of toolbox. I think the Mustard supporters probably one of the only ones that sort of has synergy with this card. I think most of the other ones like Houndoom, single strike area, etc., just aren't even that great with this card because it's grass type and uses grass energy. So yeah, unfortunately I do have to pass on Beedrill. I mean, this first attack is really solid against a lot of things out there, but your matchups are just way too polarized to actually have, I think, this be a competitive deck. Next up, we have our very first Pokemon VMAX of the set review, and that's going to be Celebi VMAX, one of my personal favorite Pokemon over the years, definitely. So I was very excited to see a new Celebi get revealed, especially a VMAX one. But unfortunately for Celebi, and myself as well, I guess, this card is not the most exciting. So let's go ahead and take a look at it though. Before we get to the VMAX, we do want to point out there is a new Celebi V, which I actually do think is probably the more interesting of the two cards. But Celebi V has an attack for a grass energy. You attach a number of grass energy from your hand to your Pokemon in any way that you like. And it has another attack for a grass colorist, does 60, and you switch this Pokemon with a benched Pokemon. So Sub EV, the first hack is definitely the one that is, I guess, kind of worth noting here. And actually, I do think there is potential for the base form Celebi EV, maybe in a different deck, not using Celebi VMAX. I think the one that kind of comes to mind to me is going to be Venusaur VMAX, just because Venusaur VMAX does more damage for every grass energy you have in play. So I could actually maybe even see a world where you're playing like a greens deck with both of these and energy spinners to get a ton of grass energy into your hand turn one to just throw down. So Celebi V might still be worth picking up in some counts just for its attack, but looking ahead to Celebi V Max does get a nice little HP buff all the way up to 310 HP. Has an ability, once during your turn you may heal 20 damage from each of your grass Pokemon, and its only attack for a grass and colorist is 130. And you search your deck for up to 2 Pokemon, put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So unfortunately, I do think Celebi VMAX is going to be a little bit lackluster overall, guys. You know, the heal 20 ability, I'm not sure how much that is really going to come into play. I guess in theory, the ability does stack. So if you do have 4 Celebi VMAX in play, you can heal up to 80 from your grass Pokemon. But a lot of the times, VMAX Pokemon have to already get 2-shot, and I don't think the 20 heal is usually going to be enough to change a 2-shot to a 3-shot. So I just think by and large, this ability largely is kind of irrelevant. And then its attack, of course, also is massively underpowered. Doing 130 is nothing, just a drop in the bucket. And kind of actually goes at odds with this ability. Because this ability, you actually would want to swarm these Celebis in play and kind of build around using Celebi V Max while tanking. But again, the issue is this attack just does not do nearly enough damage for this guy to actually be a viable primary attacker. I mean, you have to 3-shot Pokemon V Max. You actually have to 3-shot Zacian V as well. Even with this new Celebi and the old Celebi V, I don't think any of these cards really come together in a way to help Celebi V Max be a more competitive card. So while it might actually be worth having a couple copies of Celebi V on hand, I actually don't think there's much of an argument to be made for picking up Celebi V Max, unfortunately. Next up, we have another single strike Pokemon, and that is going to be Abomasnow. So, of course, Abomasnow is going to be a stage 1, and this has an ability. As long as this Pokemon is in play, the maximum HP of your single strike Pokemon in play, excluding any Abomasnow, is increased by 50, but you can't apply more than one of these abilities at a time. Then just kind of a vanilla attack for grass colors for 90. So pretty worthless attack, but the ability definitely actually isn't too bad here. It's kind of like a Cape of Toughness just for all of your single strike Pokemon. And actually, if we look to some of the basic single strike Pokemon, you can actually play Cape of Toughness and Abomasnow to get plus 100 HP, which is actually kind of crazy if you think about it. So we do have Tyranitar V and also a new Volcanion V coming out that could in theory both make use of this to become much tankier. So that's something that might be worth thinking about. But my issue with Abomasnow purely comes down to bench space. Because, I mean, if you've ever played a couple games with the single strike Urshifu VMAX deck, just as an example, I mean, you know how tough it is to manage your bench space. You want 2 to 3 Houndoops in play. You probably have a Dedenne or a Crobat, and you also have your 2 attackers in play more than likely as well. And I just really think it's going to be difficult to find the bench space for Abomasnow. I think if this card does see any play, it's going to be in single strike decks that aren't reliant on Houndoom. And up until now, there really hasn't been much in the way of that. I do think the new Volcanion V coming out is maybe a contender just because it can use Welder and potentially free up a good bit of bench space. This does actually have pretty good synergy with Volcanion since you're trying to sort of tank hits and do more damage based on the damage that you've sustained. But I think a lot of the other single strike Pokemon V and VMAX that we have running around just aren't going to frankly have the bench space or maybe even the deck space to find room for this Abomasnow. So honestly, this isn't a bad ability. It's just there's a couple of other factors that are really fighting against this card's chances at being successful. So unfortunately, I am going to have to pass on Abomasnow. Next up, we have a new Serena card. This is going to be a Stage 2 Pokemon, 140 HP, Fire Weakness to Retreat. Nothing special there, but it does have one attack here that I think is actually kind of interesting. So for 2 colorless energy, it does 10 plus 50 more for each energy in the retreat cost of your opponent's active Pokemon. This is basically the same attack that we have on Milotic V, and also very similar to the Probopass and Tangrowth that we also still have in format as well. These cards haven't really been too great. Milotic V's been probably the best in more recent memory, just kind of as an answer for Centiskorch in ADP decks. But by and large, we haven't really seen many of these styles of decks that are built around increasing your opponent's retreat cost do very well. The last one, and not to toot my own horn too much, was the Tangrowth deck that I kind of helped popularize back in the Cosmic Eclipse format. That deck and basically all these other attackers really haven't done a whole lot since. And honestly, guys, I don't think that's going to change too much. I think one of the big reasons for that is the fact that not only is this a stage 2, but also Absol is a progressively weaker card the more and more we get into the Sword and Shield era of the game. Just because, for example, when Tangrowth came out, we were in largely a very basic dominated metagame. And Absol's ability only increases the retreat cost for basic Pokemon. But now that we have VMAXs running around everywhere, a card like Absol really isn't too great. And Galar Mine's going to be one of the only sort of decent options we have at increasing our opponent's retreat cost. I think on average, you actually can hit for a kind of substantial amount of damage. You know, I think on average, a lot of things are going to have a 2 retreat cost. If they have a 2 retreat cost, plus a Galar Mine in play, you're hitting 210 damage. Not a bad energy to damage ratio at all, since you can just slap down a twin energy or a triple acceleration energy. But most of the time, you're still going to be a little bit shy of knocking out the different big basics running around in the format. And so most of the time, if you're just two-shotting stuff, there's way easier ways to two-shot things without the need of a stage 2. So I really don't think Serena is awful by any means. It's a perfectly serviceable, fair, kind of balanced card. But there's just other cards that can play the two-shot game better than this. And as a result, there's not a whole lot of reason to really play Serena, unfortunately. So next up, we have Rillaboom getting a new card in this set in the form of a new Rapid Strike Rillaboom. So just taking a look at this thing, has 180 HP, fire weakness, and a 3 retreat cost. 2 different attacks. The first one, not too great, 60 and heal 30, but the second one's a little bit more interesting. For 2 grass and a colorless, does 120, and you may discard any number of energy cards attached to your Pokemon in play. If you do, this attack does 30 more damage for each card discarded in this way. So one thing that is important to point out about this translation is that it does say 30 more for each card discarded in this way. So what that means is you won't be able to throw down something like a Rapid Strike energy or Twin energy and get a plus 60 buff when you discard it. So assuming this isn't a mistranslation, we actually really can't even make great use of the fact that this is a Rapid Strike card, unfortunately. But I mean, luckily Rillaboom still has a couple of okay ways at getting grass energy in play. Of course, we still have the other Rillaboom back from Sword and Shield base set, which can of course accelerate grass energy. And then we also have Cherrim as well that we got back in Battle Styles that can throw down as much grass energy as it wants to. So, I mean, I think Rillaboom is probably a little bit preferred in terms of accelerating energy just because it comes out of deck. But the issue there is you share an evolution line with this new Rillaboom, making it kind of awkward to set up a lot of each of these different Rillabooms that we have. And then while Cherrim allows you to put down as many energies as you want, it does require those energies being in hand, which also makes it a little bit difficult to find energy sometimes to actually accelerate into play. Another issue is that even though this has 180 HP, which is a pretty good number for a stage 2, a lot of the times you're going to discard energy and then your Rillaboom is going to get knocked out, losing more energy in play. And it's just going to require, I think, a lot to set up a new Rillaboom turn after turn, get enough energy onto this Rillaboom to attack, and then get enough energy into play to discard to take big one-hit knockouts. And if you're not taking big one-hit knockouts with this card, and you're just playing a two-shot game, why would you play Rillaboom when there's other single prize Pokemon that aren't stage 2s that can play the two-shot game a little bit more efficiently? Yeah, I think the damage modifier for this attack really would have to be a bit better to really seriously consider this, but just a 30 buff for each energy is not enough. This would really need to be closer to like 60 to really take a hard look at this card. So as a result, I don't think this card is going to see much play. All right, up next we have a new Zarude, and as you can see, we are just striking out with grass Pokemon in this new Chilling Reign set. But before I get too negative, let's talk about this Zarude here. Has two different attacks. The first of which is probably the more interesting of them, but for a grass energy, you search your deck for a grass Pokemon. But if it's your first turn and you go second, you can search your deck for 3 grass Pokemon instead. And then it has another attack for 3 colorless energy, 60 plus 20 more for each grass energy attached to this Pokemon. So I do think this first attack is kind of cool. It's very much in the same vein as the Volcanion from Unbroken Bonds or the new Cresselia that we're getting in this same set as well. But the issue with this attack compared to those is the fact that the cards that you're getting go into your hand. So in the case of Volcanion, when you're searching out energy, those go directly in play, and you don't have to worry about that being disrupted most of the time. Whereas with a card like Zarude, half the time you're going to search out 3 Pokemon and then your opponent's just going to Marnie you and you're going to lose all of those Pokemon. And now you chose to go second for no reason, basically. So that's the issue with this attack. I mean, if you don't get Marnie, this is definitely a solid attack. This can easily help you set up some of the different grass evolutions we have. Whether it be Rillaboom or maybe Decidueye. I mean, there's no shortage of decent grass evolution cards that are in the format. But again, the big issue is that this attack is a little bit slow, and also your opponent can easily disrupt it if they choose to. And that just kind of leaves it with another attack, which isn't awful. I mean, if you have 3 grass energy attached here, you can do 120. So I guess you could attempt to make the case that this could be like a one of in some other grass VMAX deck, just as a way of maybe hitting through things like Decidueye or Altaria. But even still, I mean, most of the time, other grass Pokemon VMAX or tag teams are going to use Rillaboom, which can already do the same thing. Grass Pokemon definitely struck out a little bit here in Chilling Reign, but luckily a lot of the other types are going to fare a bit better in this set review. Alrighty guys, finally getting into a card that's a little bit more exciting. We have Blaziken VMAX here. So Blaziken VMAX is important to point out. This is a Rapid Strike Pokemon, which is a big thing that does sort of affect this card's playability. So this card does have 2 different attacks. The first one, Clutch 60 for a fire, and they can't retreat. Nothing too special, especially probably not in the list that Blaziken is going to be played in. Max Blaze at second attack is definitely going to be the more important attack. But it says attach an energy card from your discard pile to up to 2 of your benched Rapid Strike Pokemon. So even though 130 really isn't a great number to hit for, you're not really building around Blaziken as your only attacker. I think your decks that are playing Blaziken are almost more of like a Rapid Strike toolbox of sorts. So I think the big partners, obviously, that you're going to have to consider for this are going to be cards like Rapid Strike Urshifu and or the new Zeraora V, which we'll also be talking about later in this set review. Both those cards, they do require multiple attachments to get up and running. So with Max Blaze, you can charge up these strong attackers while also getting some chip damage on the board as well. And especially in the case of something like Rapid Strike Urshifu, this actually can be a nice way at charging your Urshifus back up since you already are naturally discarding your energy. Max Blaze is also a great attack too, just because if you're playing against decks that are using Crushing Hammers and Energy Denial, you kind of have a way at keeping those sorts of annoying cards in check as well. And an important thing to note about this attack, it does not specify basic energies. It just says energy cards. So that means we actually can accelerate things like Rapid Strike energy into play if we do choose to, which is really, really cool. And I think we have to at least point out too that even though 130 isn't a completely groundbreaking number by any means, it is actually a good number at one-shotting things like Zacian V. They're still running around in the game as well. So I'm definitely a big fan of Blaziken VMAX only because it has these other great partner Pokemon like Rapid Strike Urshifu and the new Zeraora. And this card's kind of future-proof as well. The more Rapid Strike Pokemon that get printed, the more different partners this card is going to have as time goes on. So big thumbs up for me. I really do like Blaziken. This is among, I think, one of my more favorite VMAXs that we're actually getting in the set. Next up, guys, we have Volcanion V, which we briefly mentioned earlier in this set review, but it's a new single strike card, 220 HP, water weakness, and a 3 retreat cost. Has 2 different attacks, the first of which for a fire and colorless does a flat 50, and its second attack for 2 fire and a colorless does 100. And if this Pokemon has 10 damage counters on it or more, this attack does 150 more damage. So I think Volcanian's a very interesting card because on paper, this card has a ton of support. It's a fire Pokemon, so we can use Welder. It has colorless energy and its attack cost, and is a single strike Pokemon, so we can abuse things like Houndoom and single strike energy. There's a variety of different cards that help you get damage counters on yourself, like Spike Myth or the new Old Cemetery that we're going to be looking at later in this set review as well. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff this card can use, but I really don't think any of it comes together in a way that gives us a smooth functioning deck. And the reason for that really is because of the high amount of damage counters that Volcanion requires. I think if this was closer to maybe 6, maybe even 8, then we could be in business, because if you have 2 Houndooms in play, that's 4 damage counters. Play a couple Switch while Spike Myth is active, and maybe you can get that damage in. But 10 is just a lot to ask for. And Fire, I've said this before in other set reviews, Fire's just one of those types, guys, that there's so many strong cards. You really have to be kind of head and shoulders above the rest of those cards to really have a chance at being successful. And I just don't think Volcanion is one of those cards. I mean, another issue that we have too is you have to take a hit from your opponent, really, to be able to get this damage buff. And I think it's going to be very hard to actually do that. You have 220 HP. I think if you want to be able to ensure you can take a hit, you're going to have to play the new Abomasnow and also probably some copies of Cape of Toughness as well to increase your HP up to 320. And then your opponent can also just kind of play around this card too. I mean, you're inevitably going to have things like the Dene or Crobat in play at some point. You know, if they can avoid attacking into your Volcanion, you're only really capping out, I think, on average around 120 if you have one single strike energy in play as well. Not a big fan of this card. Like I said, there's actually a ton of cards that synergize with it. There's even other things I haven't mentioned, like Spiritomb, Jinx, and weird stuff like that, if you want to keep trying to manipulate damage counters. But yeah, it's just a very awkward attack to get set up, despite it hitting pretty decently if you're able to get it up and running. So not one of my favorite cards from this set. Next up, we got my homie Cinderace, my favorite starter from the Sword and Shield games. This guy's getting a new Stage 2, and this is going to be a single strike Pokemon as well. So Cinderace here, 170 HP, Water Weak, 1 retreat cost, but it has this ability: this Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon for each prize card your opponent has already taken. And then its only attack for a fire and colorless is 150, and this Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. So if we ignore Cinderace's energy cost for 1 second, we'll come back to that, and just look at the rest of this card, I think on paper this actually seems really solid because, you know, just with 1 single strike energy, if your opponent hasn't taken any prizes yet, you can hit for 170, which is already a nice 2-shot number. But then the further into the game you go, the more damage you can do with this thing. And if we just run through the math, if your opponent's taken 5 prizes, that's 300 damage that you're doing, excluding any single strike energies that you might have in play. And this is also before Karen's Conviction, which is a new supporter card that we're getting in the same set that we'll be talking about later, but has almost the same effect as this ability, but as a 20 damage buff instead of 30. So let's just take a second, guys. If your opponent has taken 5 prizes and you've played Karen's Conviction on the same turn as you're attacking with this Cinderace, you're doing 400 damage, excluding any single strike energy that might be in play. So yeah, this card has like insane one-shot potential. I actually do want to experiment with this, but as you can see by my rating I've given this card, its challenge is its energy cost. And while just at a quick glance, having a fire color's energy cost is actually really flexible, the issue is that this is a Stage 2 Pokemon, and it's already pretty difficult to commit all of the deck space that you need just to get the core of the deck functioning, much as playing other energy acceleration methods in addition to your Stage 2 attacker. And that's where I get a little bit skeptical of this card. So of course you can play Welder. That's definitely an option. You only need a single fire energy to accelerate with Welder. Or maybe alternatively, if you want to play a more traditional supporter line, you could just play a couple copies of Houndoom just to cheat that extra single strike energy into play each turn. So I think actually both those options will work probably okay. Again, I'm just really worried about the deck space that it's going to require to get the energy acceleration you need into a Cinderace list. And then of course in the short term too, ADP is still a very popular deck, guys. And as you know, single prize decks just have not been in a good spot for the longest time, partially because of that. So I actually really do like this card a lot, and I actually do plan on covering it on the channel at some point. We do still have to be kind of realistic. This card does have some challenges that it's going to be facing in the short term. But you guys know me, I'm a sucker for stage twos. We're definitely going to try this out on the channel, at least in some capacity. And, you know, who knows? Maybe Cinderace will actually end up being a decent one prize deck. Next up, we have a new Frostlass. Frostlass is going to be a stage 1 with 90 HP, which is good because that does make it level ball searchable. But we're really looking at this card mainly for its ability here. It says, once during your turn, whenever you play this card from your hand to evolve a Pokemon, you may search your deck for a water energy and attach it to one of your Pokemon. So I gotta say, after Chilling Reign, water Pokemon are gonna have no shortage of energy acceleration. I think we're gonna have, after the set, Melanie, Frostlass, Frostmoth, and even I think the team up Blastoise is still legal as well. So yeah, there's a lot of competition on the water energy acceleration front right now. But even with all the different water energy accelerators we have in today's format, I really don't think there is that one that just stands, you know, head and shoulders above the rest, because all of the different water attackers are very different right now and have their own needs. You know, a card like Lapras VMAX, I think really does need something like Frostmoth to get set up. But then other cards like the new Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX that we're going to look at later is a little bit more low maintenance. It doesn't really need a whole lot of energy acceleration to get up and running. So because of this variety in our water attackers right now, I think there is a world where Frostlass might be able to see play. We also do have Scoop Up Net in the format too, which means we can actually reuse this. So if we are already trying to play some sort of Jirachi engine in our water decks, I mean, this could very easily slot nicely into such a deck. But with that being said, guys, we do have Melanie coming out in the same set as Frostlass here. Melanie is basically kind of like a pseudo welder reprint for water Pokemon. So that is naturally going to give this card a little bit of competition, especially when they function very similarly. But with that being said, I still actually do kind of like Frostlass. Like I said, if you're already playing a Scoop Up Net engine, or your water deck would maybe consider playing a Scoop Up Net engine, this definitely gives it a good incentive to go that route. Or, of course, if you are a water attacker that is a little bit more low maintenance, like Inteleon VMAX or Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX, maybe this is the way you go for your energy acceleration. Or maybe you play in addition to Melanie. Either way, I think this card has potential, and I don't actually think it should be written off immediately, despite the abundance of water energy accelerators that we have after this set. Next up, we have a new Rapid Strike Inteleon, and this actually will look very familiar to anyone who played during the Sun and Moon era of the game. But it has this ability: once during your turn, you may place 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. This is the same ability that we had on Decidueye GX, which is actually one of my favorite cards of the previous generation of cards. But we do need to be clear, despite how absolutely dominant Decidueye was during different points in its lifespan, it was also in a drastically different format than the one we have today. And actually, if we look back at Decidueye, after Team Up and all of the tag teams came out, the card just kind of dropped off and stopped seeing play. And honestly, not a whole lot has really changed on that front. So as a result, it's hard for me to be as excited about this as Decidueye. But as you guys can tell by my rating, I have not chosen to write Inteleon off as just bulk. And that's for a few reasons, actually. I think the cards surrounding Inteleon are really what might breathe life into this card. So what I mean by that is the evolution line for Inteleon is actually really fantastic. I mean, Drizzile especially allows you to search your deck for any trainer card whenever you evolve into it. Fantastic card that helps you set up a little bit better. Of course, we also have the other Inteleon you can play alongside of this to search out trainer cards, and we have a new Sobble that is actually pretty good that can help get additional Sobbles into play. Or if you want, you can even forego evolving through traditional methods and play something like the Mustard Supporter to cheat this guy into play as early as turn 1 and start getting some chip damage in with this. And though I'm not sure of the definitive way to play Ice Rider Calyrex just yet, there have been some Japanese lists floating around that do play the Inteleon evolution line to fix math against a couple of different cards out there. So we'll have to wait and see how this card does. I mean, this is a card I definitely would say pick up, of course. Between it being a Rapid Strike card and being part of a solid evolution line already, I think there is a world where Inteleon could see play. But all I'm saying is I think it's okay to have a little bit of healthy skepticism towards the success of this evolution line from early Japanese deck lists that have popped up using these cards. But definitely a card I still plan on having copies up on hand, just because I do like this ability. I love the Decidueye GX of the past, so I'm curious to test this thing out and see how it does. Next up, we have Rapid Strike Urshifu. This is going to be a water stage 1 here, and we're mainly looking at it for its second attack. For a water and colorless, it does 30 for each of your Rapid Strike Pokemon in play. So this is kind of cool. We've seen these sort of swarm strategies in the past work, whether they've been in the form of the Hernandez VMAX that we have right now, or even going back further to things like Raichu from XY and Polion from Dark Explorers, etc. And actually, there's a good bit of Rapid Strike Pokemon that are worth sitting on your bench. Of course, we just looked at the new Inteleon. That's a great Pokemon to have in play just to do more damage with this attack and also cheat some extra damage counters with its ability as well. Of course, I think the other big support Rapid Strike Pokemon is going to be Octillery for its Rapid Strike Surge ability. I think there's also a variety of some other Rapid Strike cards you could play, but those are some of the, I think, more prominent ones that come to mind for me. But I have a few issues with this attack. So while it does cap out at 180, which is actually a solid two-shotting number, I think a lot of the times you're not actually going to have a full field of Rapid Strike Pokemon. One of the reasons I say that is because we have to remember Urshifu here evolves from Kubfu, and Kubfu is actually not a Rapid Strike Pokemon. And there are inevitably going to be times when you have a Rapid Strike Urshifu in play and then just a Kubfu on your bench that you plan on evolving the next turn. So that's minus 30 damage. You know, if we have a card like Mew in play, just as an example, to protect against things like Zeraora V or Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX, you know, that's also a minus 30 damage as well. And once you start sacrificing, I think, even more than one bench spot, this attack becomes significantly weaker, despite it actually being pretty easy to get up and running. So if we maybe ever get a Skyfield reprint, this actually could be a card worth revisiting. But right now, I think this card's going to be a little bit too high maintenance to really hit for the numbers that you want to with this thing. Next up, guys, we have one of the main mascots of the set. It's going to be the first of the new Calyrex VMAX cards. This is going to be the Ice Rider Calyrex, the water one. So let's take a look at this thing. It has two attacks, both of which I think are actually decent in their own ways. The first one, for 2 colorless energy, does 10 plus 30 more for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So for its second attack, you may discard up to 2 energy cards from this Pokemon. If you do, this attack does 120 more for each energy card discarded in this way. So I have to say, I do actually like both of these attacks here. Of course, Max Lance is going to be the heavier hitting one. You can cap out at 250, excluding any damage modifiers. But its first attack, I don't think should be overlooked as well, just because you don't have to discard anything. I think a lot of the times you are going to be going for sort of a two-shot war using Calyrex here. And having an attack that you can use to get in chip damage without the need to power itself back up on the next turn is something I do think is valuable here. And of course, we still have Eternatus VMAX running around, so against Eternatus in particular, this attack does hit a good bit stronger, since most time they're going to max their bench out at 8. And honestly, guys, this card just has a ton of support. So as you can see, I have a couple of cards on screen here that this thing pairs nicely with, but there's honestly just so many. Of course, we have the new Melanie supporter coming out in this set that can accelerate water energy from discard, which obviously pairs perfectly with this. We just looked at Frostlass not too long ago as well. That could also be theoretically another source of energy acceleration. The fact that this evolution line is not in any way reliant on multi-prize abilities to get set up means we can abuse the new Path to the Peak support to turn off those abilities for opposing rulebox Pokemon. And honestly, I think there's just a ton of ways to build around Calyrex. At the time of recording, I actually have a few different lists I'm working on that are sort of radically different in direction. I think one of the more popular routes that we've seen from Japan so far has been with Inteleon, using Drizzile to find these important cards like Melanie and Path to the Peak to get set up, and using the Inteleon to get in some chip damage where needed. But then there's other things like Cincino to discard energy and give yourself a good draw engine. There's the Articuno from Team Up as well that you can use to soften up opposing Pokemon VMAX for your Calyrex to come in and clean up knockouts on. There's still a lot to like. I really do like this. I think very early on, a lot of people did not like this nearly as much as the Shadow Rider Calyrex, but I don't think people should sleep on this. I think this is still also a very solid card. Now, I think the big issue that I think rightfully caused some concern for people is that pesky metal weakness that you see down there in the left corner of the card. Because unfortunately cards like Zacian can just nuke Calyrex here. And unfortunately, its second attack does not actually have colorless energy in the attack cost, making it a little bit difficult to as efficiently abuse something like Weakness Guard energy. But that being said, I think you still just play Weakness Guard energy in this deck, and I think it's going to work out a lot of the times. you have energy acceleration in the form of Melanie and or Frostlass. So getting an extra energy on this guy, I don't think is going to be that big of a deal a lot of the time. And even though it's not taking huge one-shots on VMAXs, neither does some of the other stuff. Like he turned his caps out at basically the same amount of damage. And obviously Eternus has been a fantastic deck for the longest time. I mean, like any card, it definitely has its pros and cons, but I think this card is really solid, guys. Don't sleep on this. I know Shadow Rider Calyrex has been getting more of the attention, but I think you should also be taking this card pretty seriously as well. So for this set review, we don't have too many lightning Pokemon, but what Chilling Reign is lacking in quantity, it definitely makes up in quality here with the new Zeraora V. So this is going to be a Rapid Strike card, basic Pokemon, 210 HP, fighting weakness, and 2 retreat costs, and just 1 attack. That's it. But luckily, it's a really solid one for a lightning and 2 colorless. Does 100 damage, and if any of your other Rapid Strike Pokemon used an attack during your last turn, this attack does 160 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. And of course, don't apply weakness and resistance for those bench Pokemon. So as you can see, this is almost kind of like a miniature version of Tag Bolt that we're getting. And unlike Tag Bolt, this is not a GX attack, which means we can use this over and over throughout the course of a game. So hitting for 100, then 160 is already really solid because 160 can snipe things like the Dene GX. But we actually have a few things to sort of compound that damage output even further. Of course, up until now, we have had Telescopic Sight, which can increase this damage to 190, allowing us to knock out some of those other popular bench sitters like Crobat V or Eldegoss V. But also there is a new Pissimian that we're getting in this same set as well that can allow us to do an additional 30 damage, even knocking out attacking multi-prize Pokemon V like opposing Zeraoras or Zacian Vs, just as an example. So this thing hits like an absolute truck. Of course, you do have to contend with things like Mew that are still running around that could prevent that bench damage, but if there is not a Mew in play, this Zeraora can get some insane damage on the board. Now, talking about its attack cost, I think that's actually one of the better aspects of this card. Even though it is 3 energy, I think this attack cost is highly flexible. So of course, because this is a Rapid Strike card, we can use Rapid Strike energy. That is great. We can even play Welder with this thing, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world since Blaziken VMAX is also in this same set. Lightning energy is great because Tapu Koko Prism is still running around. And because this is a basic Pokemon V, there is a world where maybe you just go all in on Zeraoras and just play Turbo Patches and Koko Prism and Rapid Strike energies and call it a day. Of course, the big issue with this attack, though, is the fact that you can't really lead the game with Zeraora. You have to have already attacked with something else, which I think does mean the partner for this is probably going to be something like Blaziken VMAX, just because Blaziken can get in that fast early game chip damage while accelerating energy to your Zeraoras safely on the bench. Or maybe even something like Empoleon V, since Empoleon V can move energy from itself to your Zeraora to attack with. So Zeraora V is an absolutely sick card, guys. Definitely be on the lookout for this whenever this set drops. Definitely among one of my favorite cards from the new Chilling Reign set. Alright guys, next up we have a new Gengar card. Gengar is going to be, of course, a Stage 2 Pokemon, a little bit on the lower HP side, only clocking in at 130. But let's take a look at this thing. It has an ability, whenever this Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, you may search your deck for up to 2 cards and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. And then it has only 1 attack, 3 colorless energy, but it is 10 plus 40 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So I think just at a glance, this sounds kind of cool. I mean, really this ability is I think the big selling point potentially for a card like this. Because, you know, the big issue with Stage 2 Pokemon is just chaining them turn after turn, especially when you do have kind of a lower amount of HP like this. This Gengar is almost assuredly getting knocked out every turn. So being able to just activate this ability after your opponent's taken a knockout and get 2 cards that are guaranteed to not get Marnied out of your hand to set up on your next turn, absolutely fantastic ability. Really do like this a lot. But if we just look at this attack, this is basically just Sableye V's attack, but worse. So really, when you think about it, this ability is really only kind of mitigating the consistency issues that you get with the Stage 2 and making it probably equally as consistent as a basic like Sableye. So at that point, it's like, well, Sableye takes up less deck space. It hits harder. It's going to be, generally speaking, a little bit more streamlined chaining your Sableyes throughout the course of a game as well. So what's the case to really make for Gengar here? And yeah, that's kind of where this card loses me. Yes, there are things like triple acceleration energy. There is a Ghastly in format that has a pretty good ability There's a new consistency boosting card coming out to help find your basic psychic Pokemon a little bit easier. But in the case of this card's attack cost, you only have 4 triple acceleration energies, and then to get 3 energies powered up on a Gengar in a single turn after you run out of those 4 can be tricky. You're going to need something like Welders or Cocoa Prisms and Twin Energies, whereas Sableye is going to be a little bit more straightforward if you just choose to go that route. You can use things like Turbo Patch and or the new Galarian Moltres V in energy switches. And I think generally speaking, it's going to be a little bit easier to chain Sableye V turn after turn. Also, if you are playing Gengar instead, you don't have quite as many spots in your deck for cards like Galarian Zigzagoon, just as an example, to easily get that chip damage in to make this attack actually do a substantial amount of damage. Because that's one of the other issues with this card is you have to kind of preemptively get chip damage on your opponent's active before you start going in with Gengar and cleaning up knockouts. So it kind of bums me out to see them make this card. It's a stage 2 version of Sableye with less HP, less damage, and a higher attack cost. Come on, like this is almost just a spit in the face to players who want to play stage 2 decks. So yeah, if I had been in charge at Creatures, this card would have been designed radically different than how it ended up. So unfortunately, while this card does have good attributes, it's not going to see play, unfortunately. Next up, we have the first of the Galarian bird trio. We are going to be taking a look at Articuno V here. So Articuno is going to be Psychic type, Dark Weakness, Fighting Resistance to Retreat cost, but we're really mainly honing in on this ability here. It says once during your turn, you may discard 2 cards from your hand. If you do, draw 1 card. So non-supporter based draw historically is pretty solid most of the time here. And while the draw that you're getting here isn't particularly deep, I think there are certain situations where you might like this card. So I think up until now, the mustard supporter cards have largely sort of struck out. I think in part due to the fact that in standard, it is kind of clunky to lower your hand size to the amount that you need without playing awkward things like Galarian Meowth or Duskull. So if you're already playing cards like that or attempting to, I think you just easily switch over to Galarian Articuno V because you still discard cards from your hand, but in the process, you at least get to draw a card as well. Which can allow you to help manipulate your hand size a little bit better and also just dig through your deck too, which is really good. And of course, beyond the mustard supporter cards, there's a number of different decks that also want stuff in the discard pile. I think Mad Party is going to be one of the ones that immediately comes to mind, where you want to toss away those Mad Partiers as quick as possible to keep turboing through your deck to do more damage. So I think Articuno actually does kind of make some degree of sense in a deck like that, especially after something like the Dedenne GX rotates. This could be a nice card at helping fuel your Mad Party damage. So that's a thing. Also, we do have a new Lycanroc in the set that wants to get single strike Pokemon into the discard pile. So again, decks like that, Articuno is definitely going to lend a hand to. But, you know, outside of those sorts of situations, I don't think Articuno is going to see too much play. Like, this is not going to see the same amount of play as something like an Oricorio GX or, you know, a Crobat V or a Dedenne GX. The draw just is not strong enough, just the single card. But with that being said, non-supporter based draw is good, even when it is a little bit on the weaker side like this. And historically, there are always cards in format that benefit from getting them into the discard pile. So I think Galarian Articuno, this is a card I'm going to remain pretty neutral on overall. I actually am maybe leaning a little bit more on the optimistic side of things, but it's a card I'm not expecting to have a ton of breakout success immediately when it releases. Up next, we have a new Gardevoir card. It's going to be Gardevoir's first time getting a single prize card ever since it switched to the Psychic typing. But before we get to Gardevoir, I actually do want to mention a new Kirlia that we're getting in this set as well, which is actually kind of good. It has a very familiar attack if anyone played back during the XY era. But just for a single Psychic Energy, you search your deck for up to 3 Kirlias and put them on your bench, then shuffle your deck. So thinking back to the XY era, of course, we had the Greninja Break deck, and the Frogadier, I think, was really the main thing that really catapulted that deck to being as good as it was. And having a Kirlia that does the same thing is something we can't overlook. So I do want to point that out. I think Kirlia is a solid card here. But Gardevoir, looking at this thing, stage 2 Pokemon, has this ability. Once during your turn, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose any number of basic energy you find there, and attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you like. Then put the other cards into your hand. And then it's only attack for 3 colorless energy, just 60 plus 30 more for each Psychic energy attached to this Pokemon. So I gotta say, guys, this card is so close to being actually a decent stage 2. But just for a couple reasons I'm going to get to later, this card does, I think, miss the mark from where it needs to be. But definitely the best part about this Gardevoir is going to be this ability. This is essentially just Intrepid Sword for one fewer card, but you don't have to end your turn. And this ability stacks, so if you get 3 to 4 Gardevoirs in play, 4 might be pushing it, but let's say, 2 to 3 Gardevoir in play, you can actually turbo through a good bit of cards in your deck and keep chaining some extra energy attachments, hopefully in the process as well. So yeah, this ability is really great. This is exactly the type of ability you like to see on stage 2 Pokemon. Since they are a little less consistent than some of the big basics running around, you sort of need these bonus effects that increase how consistent your deck works. So absolutely love this ability. This is great and synergizes very nicely with its attack. Now the attack is really where Gardevoir unfortunately does start to lose me. So it has a 3 energy attack cost. If we just run through the math on that, if we fulfill just the base attack cost, that's going to be 60 plus 90, only doing 150. And 150 is honestly not the best number to hit for because that doesn't even two-shot opposing Pokemon VMAX that are in the format right now. Now, to be fair to Gardevoir, we actually do have quite a few ways at, I think, getting some extra energy in play. We are getting the new Cresselia in the set, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit as well. That can maybe get some energies into play early on in the game. We also have EXP Share, which definitely looks like it could be a tool card that would make sense in a theoretical Gardevoir deck, just to allow you to preserve those energies that you have in play. But really the issue with a card like this is that since Gardevoir has such low HP, every time your opponent attacks, you're more than likely only going to get one attack out of each of your Gardevoirs. So that means every turn of the game, you're going to have to find your next Gardevoir rare candy plus 3 energy to get on the Gardevoir, and any additional energy beyond that on the same Gardevoir if you want to scale that damage output upwards even more. Realistically, I think you can maybe get 3 energy on a Gardevoir every turn, but any more beyond that is really going to be difficult. Now, I really do wish this attack was just designed slightly differently. Maybe had this been 60 plus 40 or 90 plus 30, and or did damage based on the amount of psychic energy attached to all of your Pokemon, then I could actually maybe get on board with this card. But the fact that you're required to just dump a ton of energy on a Pokemon that's not going to survive a hit is just way too much to ask for, even with it only giving up a single prize. It's just like narrowly not good enough. If this card ever does see play, I think it will actually just be for this ability and not for this attack at all. So unfortunately, Gardevoir is not a card I'm expecting a whole lot out of, which is a shame too, because Gardevoir has a long history in the Pokemon TCG of having these really strong single prize cards over the years. Next up, we're looking at another Gen 3 single prize card that is going to be a new Banette, and this is a single strike one, which is worth pointing out too. So Banette, stage 1, 80 HP, that's good, of course, because we have Level Ball still in the format. But it has 2 different attacks, the first of which is really, I think, the one we should focus in on here. For just a single psychic energy, you put up to 7 damage counters on this Pokemon. Then this attack does 20 for each damage counter you placed in this way. So if this attack sounds familiar, it actually should. This attack is almost identical to the attack on Frostlass back from Unified Minds. Only difference really is going to be the typing here. And Frostlass actually did see some degree of play. It was somewhat mild, but nevertheless, it did see play, mainly due to its ability to easily one-shot things like Reshizard. And Banette kind of can do the same thing for opposing Psychic Tag Team Pokemon like Mewtwo and Mew GX, just as an example. But the issue I think Banette has is that it's being printed in a radically different format than Frostlass. When Frostlass came out, Tag Team Pokemon were all the rage. And even though we do still have tag teams running around, as we get deeper and deeper into the Sword and Shield era of the game, this attack gets progressively worse. Because if you do put all 7 damage counters on Banette, that's going to make you do 140, times 2 for weakness is 280, and while that is a really good number against Psychic weak tag teams, that's just really not good enough against the different VMAXs in the format, unfortunately. Now, I guess you could make the argument that single strike energy could allow you to augment your damage a little bit. With 1 single strike energy, you can hit for 320. But the issue there too is the fact that this attack requires psychic energy, which means you'll have to attach single strike energies in addition to this card's base attack cost, which just really does not seem that good. And if you're gonna play this card, I feel like the likely home for something like this would be an Aurora energy based deck with a lot of stage 1s or perhaps even basic Pokemon that can attack for low energy costs. And I think that sort of goes at odds with things like Houndoom and the other cards from the single strike sort of toolbox. And as a result, Bayonet's probably not going to be a particularly strong attacker. Had this released maybe 2 years ago at the height of tag teams running around, maybe this would be a different story. But I think, especially going into the future, this card just does not seem as strong as it needs to be. So unfortunately, I am going to pass on Bayonet here. Next up, we have the new Cresselia, which we already kind of briefly mentioned. But this is going to be a basic Pokemon, 120 HP, Dark Weakness, Fighting Resistance, 1 retreat cost, and the attacks on this thing actually look very familiar to a Pokemon we have in the current format. So let's take a look at this. For a Psychic Energy, you search your deck for a Psychic Energy and attach it to one of your Pokemon. But if it's your first turn and you're going second, you may attach up to 3 Psychic Energy instead. And then its other attack for 2 Psychic, it does 30 plus 90 more if you have 5 or more energy in play. So if this does sound a little familiar, it should. This is basically just the Volcanion all the way back from Unbroken Bonds, but for Psychic Pokemon. And this is actually really solid too, because Psychic Pokemon have really been lacking decent acceleration ever since the rotation of Malamar. And I think going forward, I think we should expect to see Cresselia get largely played in the same way. I think the likely candidates for this card are going to be the tag teams that are still running around, like Trevenant and Dusknoir GX, and also the big hulking Psychic Pokemon VMAX that we have in format. So of course we have the new Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX in the same set that does more damage for all of the energy it has in play. This pairs perfectly with that. We even have Alchemy VMAX, which has kind of been a largely overlooked Pokemon up until this point, which also likes a lot of energy in play to do more damage. And up until now, just cards like this haven't had a whole lot of support. So Cresselia, I think this card's a home run. It is kind of boring just to see kind of a reskinned version of Volcanion. But Volcanion's been good up until this point, and Psychic has been needing some help in the energy acceleration department, so I'm happy to take this. Cresselia, I think, is still going to be a welcome addition to the card pool. Big thumbs up for me. Not a whole lot to really say about this card beyond that. Just a solid little one prize Pokemon that can accelerate some energy. So next up, we have a new and somewhat annoying Slurpuff card. It's going to be a Stage 1 Pokemon, has 2 different attacks. The second one, really not anything special, just a flat 80 damage. But the first one is where things get more interesting. For 2 colorless energy, you flip 3 coins, and for each head, you choose a card from your discard pile, show it to your opponent, and put it into your hand. And the reason I say this card is kind of annoying is because I definitely think this could be a future control archetype, largely sort of in the same vein as the old Oranguru or the Excadrill we still have in format. But one of the big things that makes this card kind of good is that the cards that you get from discard go straight to your hand, whereas with cards like Excadrill and Oranguru, they go into your deck and you're forced to find them on the next turn. Now, of course, the big downside to this is the fact that it is a coin flip. But if you're getting, on average, 2 cards back into your hand every turn, I think that's going to be really solid. So, of course, you can recycle those things like Crushing Hammers, Team Yell Grunts, and other disruptive cards like that. And basically, you'll probably just attempt to run your opponent out of resources to eventually win the game via deck out. I mean, I think that's really the idea here. So normally I would have probably just immediately upvoted this card, but the fact that this is a coin flip card does make me a little bit reserved, as you can tell by my rating here. And the reason I say that is, even though we have Glimwood Tangle to optimize the results of our coin flips, if you're playing Glimwood Tangle, that means that you're not playing some of those disruptive stadiums, like something like Galarmine, just as an easy example. And that's usually part of the allure of some of these control decks, is you can usually play these very disruptive stadiums as well as another method of disrupting and controlling, what your opponent is doing. And if you're playing Glimwood Tangle, you're not doing that. So maybe if we get like the Flip Teeny reprint or something like this, I would definitely like this card a lot more. But for the moment, the fact that we have to play Glimwood as our stadium of choice means that I think the chances of this card succeeding are a little bit lower than what it had been otherwise. So this is a card I think if you're a control player, you probably still want to have on hand, but it's not as immediately broken as maybe some of the other control cards we had up until now. Up next from there, we are getting a new Malamar card. This is going to be a Rapid Strike Pokemon, and it just has one single attack here. For a Psychic Energy, you reveal as many Rapid Strike cards from your hand as you like. This attack does 40 damage times the number of cards you revealed, then shuffle those cards into your deck. So first of all, I do think the requirement to do damage here is perfectly fine, revealing Rapid Strike cards. It's really not a bad thing, just because it doesn't specify Rapid Strike Pokemon. It can be energy. trainer cards, etc. And luckily, we are actually getting a new Rapid Strike energy that we can use for Malamar's attack cost, which gives us basically 4 more cards we can potentially do damage with. We have a couple of different Rapid Strike supporter cards up until this point, and no shortage of Rapid Strike Pokemon to play in this deck as well. With one of them actually being Octillery, which will allow you to search out Rapid Strike cards. So there is actually, I think, a lot of cards that synergize with this Malamar. But I think the issue is it's a 40 times multiplier and that you have to put those cards back into your deck. So every turn you're going to be forced to find a ton of cards to do any substantial amount of damage. You know, I think when it comes to taking big one-shots, which is probably what you're thinking about when you're reading this card, I think that's just kind of unlikely given the fact that you need so many to actually take a knockout, and also you need to still be playing cards along the way as well. You know, you still need to be benching your next Inkay. You still need to be playing cards like Karina's Focus to keep drawing cards. You still need to attach the new Rapid Strike energy that we're getting in this set to attack. So you're naturally sort of reducing your own damage output just by playing the game as you need to. So yeah, I think this attack would have needed to have been maybe like a 60 times multiplier, or maybe forego the requirement to shuffle those cards back into your deck. I think had either of those things been changed, Malamar might have been actually a card that could have seen some success, but as a result, it's going to be a little bit too tricky to do any sort of meaningful amount of damage with this card. But who knows, maybe things will change over time. This is definitely an easy stage 1 to get set up and has a lot of support. But right now, I just don't see a good way at chaining high damage from this attack every turn. And for the last Psychic Pokemon we're going to look at in our Chilling Reign set review, we debatably saved the best for last. That's going to be the new Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX, one of the big mascot Pokemon from this set. So before we talk about the VMAX, I actually do want to point out the base form, which I think is actually kind of a decent card on its own as well. So for the base form, V has an attack for a Psychic Energy, just 10, and your opponent can't play any special energy cards or stadiums from their hand during their next turn. And it has another attack for 3 colorless energy, put 5 damage counters on 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. So I actually do like both these attacks, to be honest. Its first attack is basically just a reprint of Chaos Wheel that we've seen on previous cards like Giratina EX. Now, even though the damage from this is very, very low, I think it's almost irrelevant really, because if we're attacking with this Calyrex, I think we're basically just trying to buy time until we set up our board with the VMAXs. And if we're going against a deck that plays special energies as their main way of attacking, this can definitely buy you that time that you want. And the second attack really isn't too bad either. You know, if we smack our opponent for a ton of damage but are just shy of a knockout, we can actually maybe pick them off on the bench at some point without the help of something like a Boss's Orders with this second attack. So Shadow Rider Calyrex V, also a decent card. I don't think people should be sleeping on it. But of course, the VMAX is really where most people are excited. So its ability, it's kind of actually a combination of 2 of the best abilities we've had over the years. That being Trade on Zoroark GX and Psychic Recharge on Malamar. It's kind of like we smacked both these cards together, and that's what we're getting with this. So it has the ability Underworld Door. Once during your turn, you may attach a Psychic Energy from hand to one of your bench Psychic Pokemon, then draw 2 cards. And its attack, of course, synergizes very well with that. 3 colorless energy, but does 10 plus 30 more for each Psychic Energy attached to all of your Pokemon in play. So yeah, this is definitely the attack I would have loved to have seen on the Gardevoir we looked at a little bit earlier. But luckily, Calyrex is going to come through for us. And you can easily see the synergy here, guys. You throw down energies with this ability, draw cards, and just swing for lots of damage with this attack. Now, with that being said, though, I think your early game actually isn't that great with a card like this, because let's say we want to knock out a Zacian V, just as an example. If we want to do that, we're going to have to get 7 energy in play, which, again, not impossible, but that might be a little tricky to do until the mid game, much less trying to one-shot any VMAXs or anything like that. So I think you probably still play some other attackers in your Calyrex deck. So I think some of the big ones that come to mind, of course, are going to be Mewtwo and Mew GX, Gengar and Mimikyu GX, and the Trevenant and Dusknoir GX. And now that we have Psychic Energy Acceleration, we actually don't even necessarily need to attack with Calyrex. We can actually just play this mainly as a form of energy acceleration for some of these other big basics that have kind of been lacking the acceleration they've really been wanting for a little while now. And I also do like some of the tag team attackers as well, just because if you're playing something like Mewtwo Mew, that also can help cover your weakness a little bit better, because Calyrex here is unfortunately weak to Eternatus VMAX, whereas something like Mewtwo Mew isn't. Granted, Eternatus still is able to one-shot Mewtwo Mew potentially with enough Pokemon in play, but generally speaking, it's going to be a little bit trickier. But yeah, guys, there's just a ton of support, I think, for this. We haven't even talked about some of the trainer cards that help this. Of course, we have EXP Share, but we also have the new Fog Crystal card that helps you get set up and also helps you find your energies in the late game after you already have your Pokemon in play. So yeah, this card's a slam dunk. It's great to have some Psychic Energy Acceleration back in the game, and also on a card that helps you draw cards and can hit for a good bit of damage on its own too. So Shadow Rider Calyrex here, definitely among, I think, one of the best cards in the set. You're probably already well aware of the hype this card has. You know not to sleep on this thing. Definitely a solid card. Next up, we have the second of the Galarian bird trio. We have Galarian Zapdos V. And this card has seen some pretty decent hype up until this point. I think largely for good reason, just because it's an excellent way at killing Eternatus VMAX. So if we look at this ability, it says for each Pokemon V your opponent has in play, this Pokemon's attacks cost 1 colorless less. And then its only attack costs a massive fighting in 3 colors to do 170, but again, remember that ability, guys. But it says before doing damage, discard a special energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. So I mean, yeah, this basically just reads knockout Eternatus VMAX. I mean, that's really what this comes down to. Because of course Eternatus has a massive bench with plenty of Pokemon V in play. It's gonna almost always reduce this attack cost down to just a single fighting. And then with this attack, it does 170, the perfect amount of damage to one-shot in Eternatus, barring anything like a Big Charm being in play. And then it discards things like Weakness Guard energy before calculating damage. So yeah, it's going to be very difficult for Eternatus to actually survive a hit from this thing. Unless they start relying on things like Big Charm. I think that's the only thing that could potentially save Eternatus. So yeah, I mean, that's the card. I don't think you are building a designated Galarian Zapdos V deck by any means. I mean, I guess there is a world where you could, because we do still have things like Echoing Horn to help fill your opponent's bench to reduce your own attack cost. So, I mean, it's like not out of the question. But largely speaking, I'm expecting Zapdos to be a one-of in decks that can abuse Aurora Energy if they are having a tough time with Eternatus VMAX. We just looked at Shadow Rider Calyrex. That is a very good new Pokemon that is still going to be weak to Eternatus. So maybe you even play some Aurora Energies in your deck, since that does technically work with your attack on Calyrex. And also, of course, can power up your Zapdos in the process. So yeah, this is definitely a very strong tech card. It's actually almost kind of absurd how hard of a counter this is to Eternatus. If you are expecting Eternatus to still be popular after Chilling Reign and your deck is struggling with it, pick yourself up a Zapdos. Hopefully it will do the trick. Alrighty guys, next up we have a new Gallade, which seems fair. We did get a new Gardevoir, so kind of cool for us to get a new Gallade to go with it. But this is going to be a Stage 2 Pokemon, 170 HP, Fighting type of course. Psychic Weakness, and a 2 retreat cost. Has 2 different attacks, the first of which for a Psychic Energy just does 60 and goes through Resistance. And its second attack for 2 colorless energy does 60 times the amount of Pokemon V your opponent has in play. So I think the second attack is really what is probably going to catch your attention with this card. Especially as we do get deeper into the Sword and Shield era after the last Sun and Moon sets rotate, and it's just going to be things like Crobat, Kricketune V, etc., and no longer cards like Dedenne GX and Oricorio. This attack is actually just going to kind of get better with time. But I actually think right now this card is really not quite as good as I think you would want it to be. So if your opponent sees that you're playing some sort of Gallade deck here, they can just choose not to bench more stuff and play around this attack and keep your damage output pretty low. Now, granted, we do have things like Echoing Horn to sort of help out with that. You could even play things like Mawile GX, but not every deck also plays Pokemon V. We still have tag team decks running around with plenty of Pokemon GX. We also have single prize decks. Like, what if you go against a Decidueye deck, just as an example? You just cry? You scoop up your cards and cry, basically? That seems like the most likely thing to happen. So yeah, I don't think you can actually successfully build around this Gallade. I think this would have to be sort of like a secondary attacker in some sort of deck. So you obviously, if you are playing a Gardevoir in your deck already, you could play 1 to 2 copies of Gallade to maybe get some big one-shots on like an Eternatus or something like that. But I think Gallade and Gardevoir are sort of at odds with each other when it comes to their card design. So what I mean by that is, if you're playing a Gardevoir deck, you already probably don't want to play Twin Energy or Triple Acceleration, since your whole damage output is based on your Psychic Energy that's in play. Whereas Gallade, on the other hand, kind of would prefer Twin Energy and Triple Acceleration Energy. Otherwise, you're going to need two different energies to get this attack powered up. Now, if you are playing Gardevoir, that might be able to help out with things and help cheat an extra energy into play. But at that point, you have to set up at least two stage 2s to get this Gallade up and running. That just does not seem that good to me. And it is worth pointing out too, we still have the Golisopod from Darkness Ablaze in format, which I actually think I might like a little bit better despite its typing being worse. So in the case of Golisopod, it's a stage 1, which is already a big help. It makes it much easier to play other sort of backup attackers alongside that to maybe help deal with those bad matchups against single prize decks. But also its attack gets fueled by Pokemon V and Pokemon GX, whereas Gallade's only going to be limited to Pokemon V. So even though I think at a glance this is a card that could end up exciting some people, I think really once you start digging into this card a little bit more and thinking about this card in practice, it starts to fall apart. So Gallade, it's not a horrible card by any means, but I just think it's going to be outclassed by Golisopod for the moment if you were dead set on playing a card like this. So up next, we have a new Galarian Runerigus card. It's going to be a stage 1 Pokemon, and we're going to check out this ability first. It says, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, it is damaged by an attack from your opponent's Pokemon VMAX. Even if this Pokemon is knocked out, put damage counters on the attacking Pokemon equal to the damage done to this Pokemon. And then its only attack for 3 colorless energy, 60 plus 20 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So this is kind of a unique wall Pokemon that we have here. You know, a lot of the time, these wall Pokemon tend to be a little more defensive with their multi-prize Pokemon hate, but Runerigus is actually a little bit more offensive and is focused on returning damage rather than blocking it, which I think is actually kind of a cool concept for an ability. But I can't figure it out for the life of me why this is limited to only Pokemon VMAX. Maybe they thought this would be too broken against Zacian V, since you could just like wall with this and force Zacian V to knock themselves out. But I think that's like kind of the allure of this card. That's why you want to play it. You want to play it to force your opponent into awkward lines of play where they're forced to do damage to themselves. But even still, the ability is interesting, especially since we're getting deeper into the Sword and Shield era of the game. We are seeing more and more VMAX decks catch on, so the limitation to only VMAX Pokemon might actually not be that big a deal. And for the moment too, we still have other things like Giant Bomb if you really want to get crazy and punish your opponent for attacking into you. So I definitely expect to see some interesting, fun, meme-worthy PTCGO decks pop up from this card. But as you can see, I'm still not really convinced of this card for the moment. You know, I think a card like this seems most attractive as sort of a wall target for hit and run decks like Beheeyem, Greedent, etc. But just in general, those decks really have struggled to have any success for the longest time. And I don't think Runerigus as a wall Pokemon really looks to change any of that. And just thinking about this card on its own, it's not exactly the best attacker either. 60 plus 20 for each energy attached to your opponent's active is kind of okay. It's not like the worst thing ever, but I think a lot of the time you're going to struggle to even two-shot your opponent. You're kind of relying on that ability to sort of pick up the slack for you. But even still, a lot of Pokemon discard their own energy when they attack too. Think of things like Cramorant V, or of course Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. So if you ever go against a deck that discards its own energy, I mean, you're really doing nothing at that point as well. So even though there's some okay things going on with Runerigus here, I think overall this is going to be a meme. One I actually probably will play around with at some point as well, but I'm just not expecting anything competitive out of this, especially since your opponent can play around Runerigus as well. Boss's Orders, Fion, etc. still exist. Thumbs down for me. Cool card, just not really going to do a whole lot competitively, I don't believe. Alrighty guys, next up we have a new Lycanroc, which is going to be a stage 1 single strike Pokemon here. And this thing doesn't have a whole lot going on with it, just has one single attack, but it is actually, I think, a pretty good one here. So for 2 fighting energy, it does 80 plus 10 more for each single strike Pokemon in your discard pile. Okay, so this is actually the type of card I've kind of been complaining about not having for a while now. You know, actually in some of these Sword and Shield sets, we've actually had a couple of these revenge style cards that do more damage for your Pokemon discard, but largely speaking, they've been grossly underpowered, and in my previous set reviews, I've been, you know, very quick to point that out, needless to say. So this card is actually, I think, damage-wise, a little bit closer to what we want in this day and age. Because if we think back to cards like Plasma Flareon and the Vespiquen from Ancient Origins, their base damage was far lower. And to really be a card in that style and succeed today, we really do need its damage output crept up a little bit to keep up with these growing HP totals that the game has now. And I think Lycanroc does a good job of that. 80 plus 10 is already kind of solid, but even beyond that, of course, this is a single strike Pokemon, which means that single strike energy can augment our damage even beyond that. And luckily, I think there's a ton of support to actually make this archetype work. So of course, you immediately just play a 4/4 Lycanroc without question, but also since you're already playing Houndoom to accelerate single strike energies, you can easily just crank that up to a 4/4 line, which helps ensure that you get your Houndoom set up when you need them. And also you have plenty to discard as well. And looking into the toolbox of single strike cards, also, you guys know we still have Tower of Darkness that we got in Battle Styles, which discards single strike Pokemon and helps draw you cards. So, I mean, Lycanroc, it has energy acceleration. It has support cards to help it dump cards into the discard pile. And beyond that, there's still things like Research, Hapu, etc. I think it's actually not beyond the realm of possibility to get this deck set up and functioning pretty well. Being fighting type, also a really good type to be. You hit a ton of things for weakness. So I have to say, I'm actually going to go out on a limb and stand by this card. Now, of course, you do have to contend with things like ADP for the moment, but largely speaking, I think Lycanroc can probably trade pretty effectively with most of the different decks in the game right now. So yeah, I think definitely one of the better single prize cards we're getting out this set for sure. Next up, guys, we are getting a new Passimian. This is going to be a Rapid Strike card. And while it's not the heaviest hitting Pokemon, I think it does have a really strong ability. It says all of your Rapid Strike Pokemon's attacks do 30 more to your opponent's bench Pokemon V and Pokemon GX, but you can't use more than one of these abilities at a time. But hey, that's honestly not a big deal, guys. The 30 damage buff alone is already really solid, because we do have a number of different Rapid Strike Pokemon that love to hit the bench for damage already. Rapid Strike Urshifu is going to be the big one that we got back in Battle Styles. And I think the 30 buff actually does change your math in kind of a meaningful way. But really, I think Telescopic Sight and Passimian together seem like a really good combo as well, because in the case of Rapid Strike Urshifu, if we have a Telescopic Sight in play and this, that's going to be plus 60. And you can do 180 to two different benched Pokemon. In theory, knocking out maybe a Dedenne and a Crobat, taking 4 prizes with 1 attack. That seems really, really solid. And of course, we already looked at the new Zeraora V. That's another card that easily would love a card like this, because with Telescopic Sight and Passimian, you can actually hit 220 to a benched Pokemon. Not only does that knock out all of the multi-prize support Pokemon, but also is going to knock out some of the attacking multi-prize Pokemon like Zacian V as well. So yeah, I think this card is a home run. The attack is fine, but yeah, really the math that it fixes for cards like Zeraora and Urshifu really make this a strong one of in those respective decks. Definitely pick this thing up if you are planning on playing something like Urshifu or Zeraora after Chilling Reign drops. Up next, we have another Pokemon VMAX that is going to be Sandaconda VMAX. And this one does come with a new Sandaconda V, which we should take a quick look at. So it's largely unimpressive, but it does have an ability that does make an argument to play it over the other Sandaconda. Its ability just reduces its damage by 30, which can be relevant against things like Zacian V that would otherwise one-shot it. So if the math ends up being relevant, this could be a good one to play over the old one. But really the VMAX is going to be the more exciting of the Pokemon here. So let's take a look at this thing. 320 HP, Grass Weakness, and a 3 retreat cost. 2 attacks. The first one, Sand Pulse, does 60 and 20 to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. And then its other attack for 2 fighting and a colorless does 180, and you move any number of energy from your Pokemon to your other Pokemon in any way that you like. So Sand Pulse is kind of an okay little early game attack. You can get in some chip damage with this thing. If you have a Telescopic Sight in play, you can actually do 60 and 50 spread, which actually sounds a little bit better. I don't know how often that's going to fix your math against non-single prize decks, but hey, it still helps to get in a large spread like that from time to time. But yeah, Gmax Cyclone is really the attack that I think is a little bit more exciting. Even though 180 isn't taking too many one-shots outside of fighting weak Pokemon, it is a number that's going to two-shot basically everything in the game right now, and has a lot of really good synergy with Cheryl in particular. So the idea with this thing, of course, is if you set up multiple Sandaconda VMAX, you can do 180, move all of that energy to your next Sandaconda, and then after your active takes a hit, you can use Cheryl, heal that off, and still be ready to go with a fresh Sandaconda on your bench. So that's really the idea. And then having grass weakness on top of that actually can be a little bit nice, since we do have Psychic getting a nice buff from this set. And if you are a little bit afraid to play your Urshifus and things like that, and still want to play fighting type Pokemon to capitalize on a lot of those fighting weaknesses right now, you can maybe play Sandaconda. I think that's sort of like the elevator pitch for this card overall. But I do have to say, I am a little bit skeptical on the success of this thing. 180, even though that is a good number to two-shot most things, I really don't like when cards like this can't take one-shots on two prize attackers like Zacian. Now, I know you can play Martial Arts Dojo and stuff like that, but that gets a little bit awkward, I think, from time to time, since you do have to be behind on prizes. And just in general, fighting, kind of like fire in a way, has a lot of competition out there. I feel like I say this every set review when we are looking at new fire attackers. If you're going to be a fire attacker, you really do have to be head and shoulders above the rest of all the other ones, because there's so many good ones out there. And we're kind of getting to that point with fighting Pokemon as well. We just got both of the new Urshifus back in battle styles. We also have Colossal VMAX, which I think is still also a solid card as well. So Sandaconda definitely has to sort of contend with these other ones. And largely speaking, I think the pros to those cards kind of outweigh what we get from Sandaconda. Like, Cheryl is definitely the big selling point for this, but guess what? Rapid Strike Urshifu can also, I think, abuse Cheryl, since you're discarding your energy. And then also, too, we don't have access to things like Rapid Strike Energy to more consistently get powered up. So yeah, I think Sandaconda is going to fall just a little bit shy of some of the other fighting VMAXs we have. Even though it's not a horrible card, it just gets outclassed by other stuff that exists alongside of it. Alright guys, next up we have the final of the Galarian bird trio. This is going to be Galarian Moltres V here. It's of course a basic Pokemon, dark type, 220 HP, grass, weakness, and a 2 retreat cost. And the ability is really kind of the star of the show here. It says once during your turn you may attach a dark energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon, but you can't use more than one of these abilities per turn. Then it does have an attack of its own, 2 dark and a colorless. It does 190, and this Pokemon takes 30 damage. So I gotta say, I'm a pretty decent fan of this ability that we have here. Being able to accelerate dark energy to Moltres here might not at a glance seem that special, since it doesn't have the most amazing attack. But of course, we do have to remember we have plenty of ways in the format to manipulate energy cards right now. So of course, we still have Weavile GX lingering around in the format right now, but we also just have good old-fashioned energy switch that can kind of accomplish the same thing. And the reason I like this is because let's say you are playing an Eternatus VMAX deck, just as an easy example. Now Eternatus is very reliant on having 2 manual attachments to get up and running and start attacking. And if you've ever played any games with Eternatus, you probably know how annoying Crushing Hammer and other energy denial cards can be, or even just whiffing an energy for turn. So if one of these things does happen, Galarian Moltres V actually can be a nice way at cheating that extra energy into play, assuming you have a way to switch it to your Eternatus to get it up and running. So I really do like Moltres a lot as a pseudo Crushing Hammer counter. And also, even if you don't need to power up an Eternatus, sometimes it's kind of nice just to have a Moltres on the bench, slowly but surely every turn gaining an extra energy. And sometimes if you have to go in for a 2-shot, I mean, you'd rather really attack with a 2-prize Pokemon as opposed to a 3-prize Pokemon. So I think even Moltres has a backup attacker, does have some utility as well. So Eternatus, I definitely think that's going to be the big one. But a couple of other things that come to mind if you guys are looking for some more ideas with this thing. Sableye V, I think that also seems like a very good partner. The double energy attachment has kind of been one of the major pitfalls of Sableye for a while, and having a card like this to maybe cheat that extra energy over onto your Sableye definitely seems pretty good to me. And we also still have a bunch of cards lingering around in the game too that do more damage based on the amount of energy that you have in play. So think of something like the Zoroark and Greninja GX, does more damage for every dark energy that you have in play. Moltres obviously is a perfect partner for a card like that. We also have the new Weezing and Galarian Weezing that we'll be talking about shortly in this set review as well. That would definitely love something like this. And even looking into the expanded format, Turbo Dark is technically still a deck that exists. So yet again, another card that really has synergy with that archetype. So as you guys can tell, I'm a pretty big fan of Galarian Moltres here. I think this card is a solid home run. Definitely pick this thing up if you are a dark player. Next up, Galarian Slowking is going to get its own VMAX here. This is going to be a single strike Pokemon VMAX. But yeah, 320 HP, weak to fighting, 3 retreat. And just one single attack. For a dark and colorless, you do a whopping 10 damage. So at a glance, yeah, this seems almost insulting, but let's take a look at the rest of the attack. It says your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned, but during Pokemon checkup, you put 12 damage counters on that Pokemon instead of 1. So effectively, this reads 130 damage, excluding any other damage modifiers or anything like that. And if your opponent does not move their active Pokemon and they pass or attack and it comes back into your turn, that's going to put them up to 250 damage for 2 energy effectively, which isn't a horrible damage to energy ratio. But as you can see by my rating for this card, I don't think this whole strategy is really going to pan out for you, just because every deck plays for switch, or most every deck at least. And in a format with a lot of switching cards, status conditions just are not that effective. I mean, it is nice that you're going to get in 12 damage counters before your opponent inevitably moves from the active, but yeah, you really want them to stay around for at least one more turn. And just to kind of play devil's advocate with myself here, yes, I do know there are some ways to kind of help with that a little bit. We still have Absol in the format to increase our opponent's retreat cost. We have Dust Island. You even could think about playing something like an Amistar line to potentially be able to keep your opponent from playing cards like Switch. So there are some ways you can attempt to sort of double down on the strategy, but how good that is, I'm not so sure. But being a single strike card, I will at least also point out, of course, you have access to the whole single strike toolbox, most notably Houndoom and single strike energy. Now, I will say, I guess if you really do want to play this, if you have 2 single strike energies, that's effectively going to buff your damage to 170. So even if your opponent does switch, you know, that's still a 2-shotting number, which is kind of okay, I suppose. But guys, listen, if we're trying to do 250-ish damage with a dark type Pokemon that attacks for 2 energy, it's not going to be Galarian Slowking, I'm going to tell you that. I think more than likely you should just stick to playing Eternatus. The deck is already proven to be very strong. You don't have to rely on gimmicky sort of effects like this to do essentially the same amount of damage. So I'm going to pass on Galarian Slowking, not the greatest VMAX we've looked at today. Up next to look at, we have 2 different Weezing cards, and they both kind of tie together, so we're going to take a look at both of them together here. So the first one is going to be Galarian Weezing, and we're looking at for its ability here. Each basic dark energy attached to your Pokemon with Weezing in its name provides 2 dark energy, and you can't apply more than one of these abilities at any time. Pretty solid ability. We've seen stuff like this over the years be successful. And then as you can imagine, the other Weezing does synergize pretty nicely with this. Does have 2 attacks. The first one, your opponent's active is now confused, and you attach a dark energy from your discard to this Pokemon. But the second attack is really the more interesting of the 2 for a dark colorless, or if you have your Galarian Weezing in play, just 1 dark. This attack is 20 plus 20 more for each dark energy attached to your Pokemon in play. And it's important to point out it does not specify dark energy card, just dark energy, meaning basically each dark energy you have in play is going to provide 40 damage instead of 20 if you have your Galarian Weezing in play. So at a glance, this seems like kind of a cool idea. We have Galarian Moltres, which we just looked at as well to cheat some other energies. We have EXP share. You could even attempt to play things like Turbo Patch if you really want to, though that seems a little bit clunky given the fact that we're stage 1 deck. But if we just run through the math, if we want to knock out just a Zacian V, easy example, we're going to unfortunately need 5 energy in play. And even that seems kind of questionable, I do have to say. I think realistically, you're going to maybe be able to keep like 3, maybe 4 energy in play. So I really never think this Weezing deck is going to climb up to the numbers needed to take one-shots on tag teams, let alone Pokemon VMAX. And even though it's kind of nice that both of your core Pokemon evolve from the same evolution line, it's also one of the downsides. We don't have anything like Ditto Prism Star or the old Ditto from Boundaries Cross to sort of help out and give you more bench sitters to potentially evolve into your Weezings. So right now you're stuck with just 4 Coughings in total for your deck. And God forbid you prize any of them because you're going to need basically 2 of each Weezing in play at any given point. So I have to say, I'm just not a big proponent of this whole strategy. I mean, I think you can get a semi-functioning Weezing deck here, but I just don't think it's ever going to be hitting for the numbers that you honestly just need it to hit for. Maybe down the road we can revisit this, but right now I think the lack of any real energy acceleration and the lack of, you know, something kind of akin to Ditto Prism Star really makes it difficult to argue in favor of this. So yeah, this is going to be a hard pass for me. This is a total meme. Hard pass on Weezing for the moment though. Next up, guys, we have another single strike Pokemon, and that is going to be Seviper. So Seviper is a basic dark Pokemon, just has one singular attack here for 2 dark and a colorless is 90, plus 90 more if you played a single strike supporter from your hand during this turn. So if we just run through the math really quick, that's going to be 180 damage if we do play one of these single strike supporters. And that's before counting things like single strike energy that we will inevitably have on our Sevipers. But I have to say, I actually really do like the math a lot from this attack, because with 2 single strike energies, which is, I think, a pretty realistic number to assume that you're going to have in play, that's 220. That's enough to knock out Zacian V and 2-shot all of the VMAXs. That's really kind of the gold standard, guys. You want to be able to knock out all 1-prizers, 1-shot 2-prize Pokemon, and then comfortably 2-shot any of the 3-prizers out there. But my reservation for Seviper comes from the single strike supporter part of this attack. Because even though Bruno, for example, is honestly a really solid single strike supporter, I'm honestly not too convinced we have enough solid single strike supporters to guarantee that you're going to be able to get off this attack every turn. Especially too in the early game, Bruno's just not a great supporter. Shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 4. Yeah, that's pretty weak until probably turn 3 of the game. I think it's a safe assumption. Now, clearly from that point on out, yeah, you would love to see Bruno every turn. We also have a new item card that will allow you to recycle your single strike supporters. But I just really wish we had one more sort of traditional draw-based single strike supporter card. Like, yes, we have the mustard supporter, but let's be real, that's kind of a clunky card to make use of unless your whole deck is kind of built around being able to get that effect off. We also have the new Karen's Conviction, which isn't a draw supporter, but could be a supporter you consider playing in a deck like this. So I actually really do like this Seviper card, but as you can tell, I'm a little bit hesitant to endorse it just due to the current single strike supporter pool that we have at the moment. I suppose we could consider playing some additional single strike Pokemon, maybe like Stonjourner, for the turns that we don't have a Bruno. But to me, it just seems a little bit tricky to build your deck around needing a single strike supporter when the single strike supporters that we have vary wildly in quality. But I still think this card absolutely warrants experimentation, and I definitely plan on covering this card in some capacity and testing with it, because I do think it is one of the more high potential single prize cards coming out of this set. I think I just need to get some hands-on time with it just to confirm if it's good or not. So Seviper definitely shows a lot of promise. Next up, we have Spiritomb, and Spiritomb is a card we're really just going to look at for its first attack here. For just a colorless energy, you count the number of Pokemon cards in your opponent's discard pile, put that many damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon any way that you like, then your opponent shuffles all of the Pokemon cards from their discard pile back into their deck. I'd say this is such an oppressive card for decks like Mad Party or the new Lycanroc, just as an example. You know, we saw an old Oricorio back from the early Sun and Moon sets that did something very similar to this, and we also saw the supporter card Karen shuffle cards from your opponent's discard back into their deck, but we've never seen an effect that does both of these, which is insane. So if Mad Party actually ever does sort of become a tier 1 deck that is seeing absolutely massive widespread play, you know, Spiritomb definitely instantly becomes a very, very good tech. Same thing for the Lycanroc card we looked at a little bit earlier as well. So yeah, scary card if you are a Mad Party player, but luckily I don't think Spiritomb is going to see a whole lot of play, or shouldn't see a whole lot of play, really until a deck like Mad Party or Lycanroc starts to really see absolute widespread play. So this is a card that will probably be good to own, but it's really only as good as the position of decks like Mad Party or Lycanroc in the format at any given point. Alright guys, next up we have a new Liepard. This is going to be Liepard V, and it has a pretty interesting ability here. It says, once during your turn, when you play this card from hand onto your bench, you may discard one Pokemon tool card attached to any Pokemon in play, yours or your opponent's. Then it does have an attack of its own. Dark 2 colorless does 110, and you may return this Pokemon, all cards attached to it, to your hand. Yeah, so this is obviously just an auto include in Eternatus. It's actually really funny. In this set, Eternatus has a ton of hate cards coming out to punish it, but it also gains some cool stuff like this in the process as well. So I'm personally kind of, as a side note, just kind of curious where Eternatus is going to land after Chilling Reign is legal for play. But Liepard, like I said, definitely becomes kind of like an auto one of. We've seen Eternatus play things like Tool Scrapper and Dangerous Drill already. And once Liepard comes out, there's kind of very little reason to play one of those instead. Also, a card like Lipard could just in general catch on, just because a card like Tool Scrapper for most decks is going to be kind of a chore to find on the turn that you really want it. Whereas having this sort of effect on a Pokemon means that you can get it with cards like Quick Ball, Pokemon Communication, even things like Piers if you are playing something like Eternatus. So I think there's actually pretty high potential for Lipard to see play kind of across the board, even depending on the deck. Now, you are going to have to watch out for cards like Path to the Peak that we're getting in this same set. And Lipard is going to be a little bit on the weaker side compared to some of the other Pokemon V and VMAX, much like other cards like Crobat and Dedenne. But yeah, I think his ability is still really solid. And if nothing else, Eternatus is probably going to play it in some counts. And for the last dark Pokemon we're going to take a look at today, it's going to be Single Strike Urshifu. Single Strike Urshifu is going to be a Stage 1 Pokemon here. 140 HP, has two different attacks. The first one for a dark colorist is 50, and if your opponent has a stadium in play, discard it. And its second attack for two dark and a colorist does 100. And if this Pokemon has any damage counters on it, this attack does 100 more damage. So in a lot of ways, this actually does remind me of the Seviper that we just looked at a minute ago. But one thing I do like about Single Strike Urshifu here is the fact that the requirement from this heavy hitting attack it has is actually a lot easier to fulfill than that of Seviper. So what I mean by that is Houndoom is already going to place damage counters on your Urshifu whenever you power it up anyways. So this basically just reads do 200 damage. And if your opponent is playing stuff like Big Charm, Metal Goggles, or other ways at reducing damage, you can still, with a couple of Single Strike Energy, even still knock out those two prize Pokemon like Zacian and Zamazenta with the extra damage buff from Single Strike Energy, unlike Seviper, which would probably fall a little bit short. Now, of course, the downside to Single Strike Urshifu by comparison is the fact that it's a Stage 1, does take up a little bit more deck space. But honestly, I think this is a really solid attack. You one-shot one prizers, you one-shot two prizers, and you two-shot all of the three prizers. It's really hard to ask for a whole lot more than that. Now, much like with any single prize deck, I think you do have to worry about things like ADP to some degree or another, but this thing can still one-shot everything outside of their actual ADP. And technically, I will say you can actually climb up high enough to knock out their ADP if you have all four Single Strike Energies on your Urshifu. So hey, it's a little bit unlikely, but it can happen. So I do have to say, a lot of these Single Strike one prizers in this set have really been impressing me, whether it's been this, Lycanroc, or even the Seviper, which I do actually still like as well. I think all these really do warrant a lot of exploration. Single Strike Urshifu seems honestly pretty solid. Is it going to be tier 1? I'm a little bit skeptical about that just because it is a one prizer, but I think this actually can compete with some of the major decks that are running around right now, especially since we are getting Shadow Rider Calyrex in the same set, which looks to be very popular after Chilling Reign finally drops. So next up, we're going to be looking at another Pokemon VMAX. This is going to be Metagross VMAX, and this is going to be a Rapid Strike Pokemon, which of course we do need to keep in mind. But before we get to the VMAX, quickly let's take a look at the base form Metagross V. It has two attacks, first of which for a Metal Energy is 20, flip 2 coins, 20 more for each heads. Then its other attack for a Metal Colorist is 60, plus 90 more if you and the defending Pokemon have the same amount of energy attached. So nothing too groundbreaking, but the second attack might be nice sometimes at getting in some chip damage. But Metagross VMAX, of course, is going to be more of the star of the show here. This is going to be a VMAX Pokemon with 330 HP. Being Metal type means it is going to be weak to those pesky fire Pokemon, and it also has a 3 retreat cost. But two attacks just like its pre-evolution. The first one for a Metal Energy, search your deck for up to 2 cards, put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. And second attack for a Metal and Colorist is 100, and during your next turn, this attack does 150 more damage. So kind of an interesting first attack here on Metagross VMAX. This is definitely an attack I kind of wish they would have maybe swapped with the pre-evolution. Just because if you're using this attack, you're using it on turn 2, and this is really the type of attack you'd want to use as early as turn 1 to help you get set up. You know, once you have your Metagross VMAX, you want to be doing damage at this point, so just kind of an odd design decision. But of course, its other attack is really what you would be attempting to build around, hypothetically, if you did want to play Metagross VMAX here. Now, it is important to point out, this damage isn't going to continually stack and stack. It does cap out at 250. You're not going to be able to push that up to like 400, then 550, etc., etc. So just right out the gate, if you are able to actually successfully chain this attack back to back, doing 250 for 2, not a horrible amount of damage. That's actually a really solid energy to damage ratio. But there are some issues with this because, of course, you do need to preemptively do 100 damage to start with before you can start chaining that 250 back to back. And then from there, the other issue too is if you ever have to go to the bench for any reason, that is going to reset your damage back down to 100. If your opponent plays something like a boss's orders to bring up maybe a Dedenne on your bench, or plays even something like a Fion, that is going to reset your damage cap to only 100, which is kind of a pain, I do have to say. I think that is going to be potentially the Achilles heel of this card. And I think most of the time, Metagross is really realistically only getting off 2 attacks before it goes down. But I think really to give this card any sort of legs, I think you are going to need to have to play maybe something like a Cheryl or some sort of healing engine to get some repeated benefit out of this attack. Because if we're just two-shotting Pokemon VMAX, there's much more reliable ways at having to do so. So I think Metagross needs some extra tricks to be able to really make a case to be played over other similar sorts of VMAX Pokemon. And luckily, I think it actually does have a few good things going for it. I did mention Cheryl already. Actually doesn't seem horrible just because we have Bronzong in the format to move your energy off of Metagross and then Cheryl all of that damage off. And we still have things like Metal Saucer to cheat our metal energies into play. But metal has kind of become one of those types in the game where there's a lot of stiff competition in terms of what metal Pokemon you might want to play. Zacian V is obviously the big one that we have right now, but even so, other things like Corviknight VMAX are solid alternatives as well. And we really just have to ask, is Metagross really any better than these other cards? I think in terms of being a metal Pokemon, I think Zacian V and Corviknight are actually probably both a little bit better than this. Even though Corviknight attacks for 1 more energy, it has a great ability, Free Retreat, and still has the same synergy with cards like Cheryl. And even in terms of being a Rapid Strike Pokemon, I really don't think there's a lot to like about Metagross VMAX. I mean, yes, you can play things like Octillery to help search out your Metagross line, but beyond that, I really don't think this card has a whole lot of synergy with the rest of the Rapid Strike cards. We can't use Rapid Strike energy to power up this attack. There's not really a whole lot of reason to use something like Mustard. So for Metagross, I actually don't think this is a horrible card. I think it can play the 2-shot game, but there's just other things that do the same thing kind of better. So I'm going to pass on Metagross VMAX here. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at a new Torres card that's going to be a single strike Pokemon, has 2 attacks. The first one's definitely going to be, I think, the more interesting of the 2, but 2 colorless energy is 20, plus 20 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. This Pokemon is now confused, and its second attack for 2 colors does 80 and takes 30 damage. So this is a card that almost kind of baited me into thinking it was good. I quickly sort of glanced at this first attack whenever this card got revealed. And if you just run through the math, you can actually hit like a truck with this Tauros. Because if you do have 12 damage counters on it, you're going to be hitting for 260 plus any single strike energies you might have attached. And that's not even factoring in things like Cape of Toughness if you want to be able to buff your damage even further. But the big issue with a card like this is that it's just going to be extremely difficult to actually get that damage on Tauros. Yes, of course, we have things like Houndoom. That's going to be one of the easiest ways to get damage counters on our Tauros. We have some pretty good stadiums like the new Old Cemetery, and we do still have things like Spiritomb and Jinx as well if we do want to do that. But every turn that you're going to attack with Tauros, you're going to need an insane amount of combo pieces if you want to buff this damage to any meaningful amount. So who knows, maybe down the road we'll get a card kind of like the old Reuniclus that'll allow you to move a lot of damage around your board kind of more flexibly. But right now, without any reliable way at moving a ton of damage to this thing is not going to be hitting anywhere near its full potential just because this thing is so fragile. It's basically a huge glass cannon that kind of is impossible to load up. So for the moment, Tauros has some insane damage potential, but it's just far too difficult to actually get all the pieces that you need every single turn to hit for the amount of damage that this thing is sort of promising. Next up, we have a new Porygon Z. It is a Stage 2 Pokemon, 140 HP, Fighting Weakness, 2 Retreat Cost. But it has this ability, once during your turn, when you attach an energy from your hand to this Pokemon, you may leave the opponent's active Pokemon confused. And just one single attack here, for 3 colors does 170, and you discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. So yeah, I think if you're building around this Porygon Z, the deck almost kind of builds itself. You have triple acceleration energy still in the format, which means we can just immediately throw that down, confuse our opponent with this ability, and the discard effect from this attack really isn't even that bad because we're going to be discarding triple acceleration anyways. So for 1 attachment, we can do 170 and confusion. Not too bad, just because 170 does 2-shot everything, in the game, and confusion might potentially buy you a turn of your opponent not being able to attack you, or at the least force them to have switching cards and burn additional resources to be able to attack you without a confused Pokemon. But as you can tell by my rating, guys, I'm really not sold on the competitive viability of this card. Just for the fact that if we want to play the two-shot game, there's much easier ways to do that than to play a stage 2 Pokemon. Even with an attack that is flexible like this. Like I said, we do have triple acceleration energy. We still have things like twin energy plus Cocoa Prism Star, or even if you want to play the welder route, that also would be just fine as well. So I don't think it's going to be a huge issue chaining these Porygons. And yes, I know the big selling point to Porygon is the fact that it can two-shot things while only being a single prize Pokemon. But even still, we have much more efficient ways at playing the two-shot game with single prizers, mainly in the form of a bunch of stage 1 decks with things like Mad Party, Whimsicott, or even some of the other new single prize cards that we looked at in this set even. And also, being a colorless Pokemon means that Porygon can't even occasionally take one-shots on Pokemon weak to it like some of these other cards I just outlined. So yeah, I think Porygon is a totally fair, sort of balanced, usable card, but like so many other cards that we've looked at, it just kind of gets outshined by other things that do the same thing it does, but a little bit better and more consistently. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at Blaziken V. This is going to be a basic Pokemon clocking in with a whopping 250 HP, fighting weakness, and a 4 retreat cost. So the ability on this thing, nothing too special, but whenever we do attach an energy from hand to this Pokemon, remove all special conditions. But the attack on this thing is really where Blaziken gets a little bit more interesting. So for a colorless energy, it does 10 plus 30 more damage for each energy attached to this Pokemon. After doing damage, you may attach up to 3 energy cards from your discard pile to this Pokemon. I think this attack has a lot of potential here. It's kind of like Scorch VMAX. You know, you don't do quite as much damage, which is fair. You are a basic Pokemon. Scorch is an evolution. That is, I think, pretty fair, but you do get 3 energy cards. And one thing I do like about this, it does not say basic energy, which means we can actually accelerate special energies from discard to this Pokemon. And Blaziken V being colorless actually opens this thing up to playing a lot of potentially interesting colorless energies. So of course there's some staples that are always running around the format like Weakness Guard energy or Capture energy, which definitely could have a home here, but we still have other things like powerful colorless energy, which I think is really where this card gets a little bit more exciting. We also have things like Draw energy and the new Lucky energy that we're going to be looking at later in this set review as well. And I think getting these energies in the discard really isn't even going to be that big of a deal. I mean, of course, we have Professor's Research. We still have things like Hapu in the format, Dedenne GX. We even have Cincino maybe as a potential draw engine here for Blaziken V, just because you can pitch away your special energies and draw cards with your Cincinos. So that's actually a route I wouldn't mind building, but I think Porygon Z might be the big one that sort of comes to mind for a lot of people. Because one of the downsides to some of the other Porygon Z decks is that if you have to like pitch away your special energies early on before you get set up, you really don't have a way of ever really getting those back. But Blaziken gets around that pretty well, which I really do like. So of course, with Porygon, we can slap down a million recycle energies and stuff like that. But then even once some Blizzies get knocked out, we can still retrieve some of those other special energies we've lost along the way with this attack. And Blaziken only being a basic Pokemon is another thing I really do like in the context of Porygon Z, because I think some of the other Porygon Z based decks that we've seen pop up or attempt to be popularized have had a little bit of a space issue, since VMAXs have primarily been some of the main potential partners for Porygon up until this point. So I'm really excited for Blaziken V to sort of free up some space in that potential deck. And one thing I kind of already mentioned as well is the fact this thing has 250 HP, and that's excluding things like Cape of Toughness or buff padding to increase Blizzy's HP even further beyond this 250 base amount. So yeah, guys, I'm actually kind of excited for this Blissey card that we have here. But as you can see by my rating, I do have some sort of reservations for this thing. And I think really the big one for Blissey is the fact that if we are playing against a deck that can one-shot Blissey, I think it's actually very difficult to set up a fresh Blissey that can do a reasonable amount of damage, because, I mean, realistically, you're going to be attempting to just dump as many energies as possible on each of these attackers. And every time they go down, you're going to have to kind of start from scratch building that Blissey V back up. Now, of course, in the case of a Porygon Z-based deck, you can get things like Recycle Energy back, but even still, you're really not probably going to be hitting enough to take big one shots with these things. So that's the thing I really don't like about Blissey. You know, had this attack been worded slightly differently, I would instantly sort of upvote this card. You know, if you attach the energy to Blissey before calculating damage, yeah, we would definitely be in business. I would definitely be much more excited about this card. Easy thumbs up. We'd move on to the next card to discuss. But I think getting a fresh Blissey powered back up to the point where it's doing ridiculous damage is a little bit awkward. That kind of makes me a little bit hesitant to completely endorse this card. But guys, I promise you, we are definitely going to be experimenting with this card on the channel. I actually have a few different lists for Blissey I've actually been working on. So even though I am dishing out a more neutral rating for Blissey, I think if you'd caught me just on a different day, I could have easily flipped my rating to a positive rating for this card as well. So yeah, definitely think one of the 2 prize Pokemon in the set to be on the lookout for and try out. So next up we have a new Zangoose, which probably comes as no surprise since we had a Seviper, which is kind of cool. I actually do like the concept for this. Both these Pokemon are rivals in the lore of Pokemon. But Zangoose just has 1 attack for 3 color synergy, does 50, and if you played a Rapid Strike supporter card from your hand during this turn, this attack also does 50 to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So I almost completely skipped over this card. I think at a glance, this just seems really bad. 50, 50, and 50 really isn't a great amount of damage to get in. But then I remembered, wait, we have Telescopic Sight. We've got Passimian coming out in this same set as well. So actually, once you start thinking about it, Zangoose does 50 to your opponent's active, but then does 110 potentially to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon V. Suddenly, Zangoose actually looks a little bit more enticing here. Now, just to be clear, I don't think we're ever building a deck around Zangoose. No. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this thing needing 3 energy and having kind of an awkward attack requirement to get this additional spread is going to be the thing that kind of holds it back from that. But that being said, guys, I actually think this could be a potential one of in decks that play things like Blaziken VMAX, Empoleon V, or other ways at accelerating energy in a Rapid Strike deck. You know, this card definitely very much reminds me of a card like the Zeraora V that we just looked at, or like Rapid Strike Urshifu. But the big selling point, of course, to Zangoose is the fact that it only gives up a single prize card, and sometimes that, of course, can make the difference between your opponent having to take 6 prizes versus forcing them into potentially a 7 or 8 prize game instead. Now, of course, though, that big downside to this card is the fact that you have to play a Rapid Strike supporter, and that's where things get a little bit annoying. I actually think I'd probably just upvote this card if it didn't have that stipulation, but because the pool of decent Rapid Strike supporters is kind of weak right now, that does sort of make me check my enthusiasm for this card a good bit. You know, Karina is definitely going to be the big one that comes to mind. Yeah, it's not quite as good as something like Professor's Research or Marnie most of the time, but I think it's perfectly reasonable if you're playing a Rapid Strike deck, especially if it's one that does play an Octillery line, to play 1 to 2 copies of Karina's Focus. But you know what, guys? We're getting more and more of these Rapid Strike cards, and there are some new Rapid Strike supporters coming out in the same set as well. So I'm going to be a little bit generous and stay a little bit neutral on this. I actually think more than likely this card might not see a ton of play right out the gate, but this is a strong spreading effect with cards like Telescopic Sight and Passimian, and does kind of nicely slot into some of these Rapid Strike decks that I already mentioned as a potential one of. So even though I think this card's chances are a little bit on the low side right now, I think it's a card that could be worth having at least a copy of on hand. Alrighty guys, so next up we're going to take a look at the new cast forms coming out in Chilling Reign. We have 4 different ones to go over, but they all sort of go together probably in the same deck here. They all have this same ability that says if you have 8 or more stadium cards in your discard pile, ignore all energy in the attack cost of each of this Pokemon's attacks. So in the case of the Sunny form cast form, its attack does 150, and you must discard a stadium card in play in order to use this attack. We have the Rainy form that does 20 to each of your opponent's Pokemon. We have the Snowy form that does 120, and it can't use this same attack on your next turn. And finally, we have the Colorless cast form that does 80, and you draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. So these cards actually remind me a lot of the Rotom cards that we actually had back during the Sun and Moon era of the game. Very similar sort of mechanic here, though those Rotoms really never took off in any sort of meaningful way. And I think these cast form cards are kind of around the same power level, which doesn't bode too well for these things. Now, with that being said, though, there are a ton of powerful stadium cards in the format, so requiring this deck to need to play them isn't a bad thing. So this means you can play higher counts of cards like the new Path to the Peak or Old Cemetery, But even going back, we still have some Sun and Moon era cards I think are pretty good as well. Of course, you can play things like Viridian Forest or Giant Hearth to more easily discard your stadiums, but there's a couple of other ones that really stand out in my mind. Of course, Wondrous Labyrinth Prism Star. I think that could definitely be a really solid stadium, as this ability should sort of negate any of the effects of Wondrous Labyrinth for yourself while only sort of impacting your opponent. And also Martial Arts Dojo. I think that's the other one that kind of stands out to me here, because Martial Arts Dojo is going to increase our damage by 40 if we're behind on prizes. We just need a basic fighting energy. We can probably just get away with running, 3 or 4 copies of fighting energy just for the turns that we need it with Dojo. But on the turns that we don't have it, not a big deal, because we can still attack like normal. So I think those are going to be among some of the more standout stadium cards, and we have no shortage of ways at discarding them in the process. Of course, we have things like Professor's Research and Dedenne GX, but then there's still other things in the format lingering around, like Hapu and even Cincino, if you want some sort of draw engine for your deck as well. I'm actually kind of curious to see how this thing is going to do, but my gut reaction to these is that, much like with the Rotom cards from before, I don't think these cast forms are going to be in a good spot to really be taken seriously as some sort of true competitive deck. I think they're a little bit just shy of the power level that I really want to see from these cards. So even though I think these cards are kind of solid and fairly balanced, that's just not good enough, to be honest. I really think the power level from these cards would have needed to been a little higher for them to be able to see play. So as a result, I'm going to pass on these cast forms. Next up, guys, we have the very last Pokemon VMAX of the set review. That is going to be Tornadus VMAX. And to kick things off, let's take a look at the base form Tornadus V. Has 2 attacks. The first one for a colorless energy is 20 plus 20 more if there is a stadium card in play. And its other attack for 4 colorless does 180, and you discard an energy from this Pokemon. So blow through, not an awful attack to get in some chip damage. If you have a single strike energy, you can hit for 60. Not the worst thing in the world, but of course, Tornadus VMAX is going to be the card we are going to want to focus in on a little bit more. First attack for 2 colorless energy does 60, and its primary attack, though, for 4 colorless does 120 plus 120 more if there is a stadium card in play, then discard that stadium. So just to be honest with you guys, I think this is just a much worse version of Single Strike Urshifu VMAX. While yes, this thing is going to be colorless, meaning that it can abuse additional forms of energy acceleration like Welder or Tapu Koko Prism Star, I don't think that's enough of a case to be made to play this over some of the other single strike attackers that we have right now. Being colorless means we can't ever hit anything for weakness. And unlike Single Strike Urshifu, we can basically exclusively take one-shots on tag teams, and that's really about it. I guess, yes, if you have 4 single strike energy attached, you can do 320. But that's honestly a lot to ask for, and a lot of Pokemon VMAX now that are popular, like Eternatus and Rapid Strike Urshifu, actually have HP totals that go beyond that. So yeah, for the same amount of energy, I'm playing Single Strike Urshifu basically every day of the week instead of this thing. So in making this segment, guys, I was really trying to scratch my head hard thinking, man, there's got to be something I'm missing. There's no way they would print a card this pointless when Single Strike Urshifu does the exact same thing, but much better. So unfortunately, not the best Pokemon VMAX to end our set review on. And for the last Pokemon we're going to look at today is going to be a new Greedent. Greedent is a Stage 1 Pokemon that has a very interesting ability. It says prevent all effects of your opponent's item and supporter cards that would discard energy from your Pokemon or return energy from your Pokemon to your hand or deck. And then just kind of a generic attack here, 3 colors to do 90. So this card actually got a good bit of attention from the community whenever it got revealed. I think a lot of people were initially very excited about this because we still have things like Crushing Hammer, Team Yell Grunt, etc. in the format that can be extremely annoying if you are a deck that is susceptible to those cards. And being able to just throw down this Greedent and turn off all of those Crushing Hammers is something that does seem really attractive, I think, at first glance. But as you can tell by my rating, guys, I'm actually not sold that this is going to be the best way at teching against things like Crushing Hammers. While they are a card that sees play in certain archetypes, even those same archetypes sometimes choose not to play Crushing Hammers. Think of a deck like ADP just as an example. We've seen plenty of Zacian decks play Crushing Hammers, but then most of them actually end up not. So the decks you might be teching against that play Hammers might not even be running them in their list every time. And even beyond that, there's multiple ways at dealing with energy denial from your opponent And most of the time, I think you can play different ways at protecting yourself more against Crushing Hammer while also still helping you in matchups that aren't playing Crushing Hammers. So I think a good example of something like this would be a deck like Dragapult VMAX. Dragapult is a card that is reliant on 2 manual attachments to attack, meaning that it's a deck that is very susceptible to Crushing Hammers. So of course you could play something like Greedent, but I think probably a better way to go would be to, instead of playing a card that protects against energy denial, would just be to play ways at accelerating a couple of energies. So this could be in the form of a trainer card like Turbo Patch or Rose, or you could choose to play maybe a thin line of the new Shadow Rider Calyrex to cheat an extra energy into play from time to time. But with those sorts of cards, they're going to help you even in matchups that aren't playing Crushing Hammer, whereas Greedent is exclusive to the few decks that are playing Crushing Hammers. So for that reason, guys, I'm going to downvote Greedent. This is actually a really solid ability, but being on stage 1 means that you're probably going to have to expend a little bit more effort than you would like to get this into play, and some of these other options that I outlined are going to require on average a similar amount of effort to get into play, and those are just going to be, I think, better most of the time. So the first trainer card we're going to take a look at here is going to be Agatha. Agatha is a supporter card that says move up to 3 damage counters from your active Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon. So this is actually, I would consider, somewhat of a spiritual successor to the Grimsley card that we've had for a while now. And that was another card that in my set review when that came out, I was not too keen on that, and I don't think really a whole lot has really changed with Agatha. But I will say Grimsley in the past has actually seen very, very fringe play and popped up at a couple of random tournaments. So if Agatha does see any play, it's probably going to be in a similar capacity. So even though this card effectively heals 30 from you and gets some damage on your opponent's field, I think it's just going to be very awkward a lot of the times to make this effect actually be meaningful and change the math in terms of needing to one-shot something versus a two-shot. And a lot of times, if we're in one-shot oriented formats, the requirement of needing to move 3 damage counters from your own Pokemon can be kind of clunky. So I think if we want to get 3 damage counters on our opponent's Pokemon, I think we have much better ways at doing that. I think obviously Galarian Zigzagoon is going to be the big one since it's so easy to abuse with Scoop Up Net Engine. Also, if you're playing Agatha, that means you're not playing other better supporters like a Professor's Research or a Boss's Orders. And because you still want to play those other supporters, you have to run Agatha in kind of, I think, smaller quantities, probably 1, maybe 2 at the very most. So I think it's going to be just too awkward to find a turn where Agatha actually matters and makes a difference, and also have it in your hand and not need to play other things in your turn as well. So yeah, big thumbs down for me. Definitely not a great way at kicking off our look at the trainer cards here. Next up, we have another supporter card. This is going to be Avery. It says draw 3 cards, then your opponent discards their bench until they have 3 benched Pokemon. All right, so this was actually a card that had a lot of hype from the community. I remember when it first got revealed, a lot of people I saw were reflexively kind of saying Eternatus was dead and stuff like that, just because obviously that's the big application for this card is if you're going against Eternatus VMAX and they have that full bench of 8 Pokemon, making them discard 5 Pokemon is pretty good. So why isn't Avery just a complete slam dunk? Well, first of all, I think this card is basically only good against Eternatus, because I think in a lot of other matchups, the discard effect actually helps your opponent more than hurts, because they are almost guaranteed to have something like a Dedenne GX or a Crobat V in play, and these are Pokemon you want on your opponent's field. They typically wind up being the last 2 prizes you need to close out a game, and if you play Avery and allow your opponent to discard them, well, suddenly that might make your path to victory a little bit tougher. And unlike something of the past like Parallel City, which had a very similar effect to this, your opponent can just refill their bench after they discard. Parallel City locked them at 3 bench Pokemon and also allowed you the choice at discarding some of those vulnerable bench sitters like I just mentioned. So even though at a glance this feels kind of similar in effect to Parallel City, this is nowhere near as good. That being said, there is a reason why I've chosen to kind of remain a little bit neutral on Avery. So of course, I think the big Eternatus tech that is coming out of the set is going to be Galarian Zapdos V. Now, of course, the downside to Zapdos is the fact that you are going to need Fighting Energy or something like Aurora Energy to provide the necessary energy to take those easy one-shots on Eternatus. Now, not every deck can play something like Aurora Energy or Fighting Energy. It might not actually fit well within the core of their existing deck. So I think Avery for these types of decks could still provide some sort of decent tech option, just because making them discard 5 Pokemon is really tough for them to recover from. Especially right now with Eternatus not really playing any Pokemon recovery to get those things back. So that's your application for this card, guys. I don't think it's going to see a lot of play outside of that. I think Galarian Zapdos V is going to be, generally speaking, the much more reliable Eternatus tech that Chilling Reign is going to be giving us. Next up, we have a new Rapid Strike supporter. That is going to be Burslie. Burslie says search your deck for up to 3 Rapid Strike basic Pokemon and put them on your bench, then shuffle your deck. So we're no stranger to this type of effect in the game. We've had a number of cards like this that I've actually seen a lot of play over the years, whether it's Pokemon Collector or Bridget or even things like Pokemon Fan Club. There has been a precedent set for these cards to be good in the past, but I think the current climate of the game is actually very hostile to cards like this. So let's break down what I mean by that. Getting 3 basic Pokemon is great actually as a supporter. That can basically help set your entire board up with a single card. But let's compare this to a card like Bridget, which is one of the more recent incarnations of a successful card like this. So in the case of Bridget existed in a different time in the game where you actually could play supporters on the first turn of the game. Whereas nowadays, you actually can't. If you want to be able to play this on the first turn of the game, you have to choose to go second. And if you don't have this in your opening hand, then, well, you kind of missed your window that you really needed to be able to play a card like this. So if you want to find Burslie on turn 1, going second, you have to play a very high count of this card, probably close to 4 copies. And in the mid to late game, a card like this is just kind of dead at that point. There's really not a whole lot of reason to play this when Quick Ball is usually going to be enough to carry you through the rest of the game from there. So I think this card is definitely a hard pass for the moment. Now, if we do get something akin to a Tapu Lele GX down the road, we can revisit this card, but for the moment, this is complete bulk. I don't think there is a very good reason to play this right now. Next up, we have, yet again, another bad supporter card. That is going to be Caitlin. And Caitlin here is actually a reprint of a card all the way back from Plasma Blast. But it says, put as many cards from your hand as you'd like on the bottom of your deck in any order. Then draw a card for each card you put on the bottom of your deck. So first things first, art on Caitlin, amazing. Way better looking than the old Plasma Blast counterpart. But let me just throw it out there immediately. This card is a complete trap. I remember I took a small little hiatus from the game when the plasma sets first came out, got back in around XY, and I saw Caitlin. I was like, oh, this seems like a really solid supporter card. You can, in theory, if you have a 10 card hand as an example, you can put those 10 cards back and draw 10 or something crazy like that if you want to. But I quickly found out once I got back in the swing of things, oh, this card is not good. Just because if you don't have a large hand size, Caitlin really doesn't do a whole lot for you. You know, let's say your opponent hits you with a Marnie, and your only supporter is a Caitlin. Well, guess what? If you play your Caitlin and put the rest of your cards back, you're only drawing 4. Really not a great effect. Or, God forbid, your opponent hits you with a late game reset stamp down to 1 or 2. This card is reliant on you already having a lot of cards. Now, I will say, if you do have a large hand size, Caitlin can be a decent supporter just because, let's say you are a very combo-reliant deck. Maybe you're a deck that plays rare candy, just as an easy example. Being able to put a lot of those non-rare candy cards at the bottom of your deck and draw fresh ones while keeping those key combo pieces is a cool effect. But again, you need a huge hand size to really get this sort of value out of this card. So if this card ever does see play, which I'm not confident of at all, I think it would be with a card kind of like Shadow Rider Calyrex or like Zeraora GX of the past, where you're just kind of trying to expand your hand size and make it larger and larger. But even still, guys, I think our supporter pool is filled with much better options than Caitlin right now. So this is unfortunately going to be a pass for me. Next up, we have Doctor. It says, draw 2 cards. If your opponent's active is a Pokemon VMAX, draw 2 more cards. This card is just definitely not strong enough, especially if you start with it and your opponent isn't like mustarding out a VMAX on the first turn of the game. This is an awful supporter card to lead the game with for sure. And even still, not every deck plays Pokemon VMAX, meaning half the time you're only drawing 2 rather than the full 4 count this card is offering. Just play Professor's Research, guys. Just play Marnie. Just play Cynthia and Caitlin if you want a sort of draw 3-ish card. Kind of like this. Doctor is very, very weak. I think maybe if the design of this card had been tweaked to where it was only Pokemon V, I think actually I would consider playing Doctor from time to time. But the fact that it's only VMAX makes this card far too situational to warrant playing this over some of the other options we have right now. Next up, continuing our streak of bad trainer cards we've looked at thus far, we are going to be taking a look at Dyna Treehill. This is a stadium card, and it says Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, can't be healed. So this really isn't an awful effect that we have here. Being able to stop things like Cheryl or Hyper Potion or Mallow and Lana are definitely cards we don't mind attempting to shut down. But I think this card has a few too many things pushing back against it. I mean, the first thing is that stadiums are everywhere, especially ones like Chaotic Swell, making it very difficult for a card like this to actually stay in play. And then Chilling Reign's actually giving us some better stadiums we're going to look at in just a little bit as well that are only going to further add more stadiums into the mix. It's going to be very difficult to play down Dyna Treehill. Your opponent have a healing card that they're going to play that turn and them not have a counter stadium of some sort. And in the case of something like Mallow and Lana, we still do have Mimikyu in format that you can play as a tech card to just sit on your bench and prevent your opponent from healing with Mallow and Lana. And that's really the main one that people are going to be playing. So I'm not really too worried about teching for things like Hyper Potion or Cheryl, just as an example. I don't think those cards are widespread enough in play to really warrant committing additional deck space to a fairly low impact weak card like Dyna Treehill. Alright guys, here we go. We finally are going to be taking a look at a solid trainer card that is going to be Echoing Horn. Echoing Horn is an item that says put a basic Pokemon from your opponent's discard pile onto their bench. So for anyone who's been playing for a while, this will actually look very familiar to a card called Target Whistle back from the XY era of the game, which saw a lot of play actually, just because with Target Whistle, back during that day, Shaymin EX was kind of like the main low HP multi-price support Pokemon of its time, and in different decks they would play Target Whistle to be able to put a Shaymin out of their discard pile onto the bench and take an easy knockout on it. Right now we have plenty of similar Pokemon that we don't mind using a card like Echoing Horn on. Of course, the Dedenne GX is going to be the obvious one here, but we do still have other things running around like Crobat V, Kricketune V, and Eldegoss V, just as a couple of other examples. You know, especially when you think about cards like Rapid Strike Urshifu, the new Zeraora V, Cramorant V, etc. Being able to just back-to-back keep putting the Dennes on your opponent's bench and sniping them is something that's really attractive. And I know people are sick to death of ADP, but this is, for better or for worse, going to help a deck like that for as long as it remains in standard format as well. Just because the strategy a lot of decks take if they're going against ADP is that they want to discard some of these easy targets like the Dennes. That way ADP just can't easily bring them up and win with 2 attacks. But now that Echoing Horn is in the picture, that might not be as easy for them. You know, also think of decks like Decidueye going against ADP. A lot of times the game plan for Decidueye decks is to just discard all of their excess basic Pokemon and keep a lone Decidueye in play. Echoing Horn now makes that strategy a little bit tougher. So Echoing Horn is a slam dunk. I mean, it's just Target Whistle, but even better because it's technically searchable by things like Octillery. And then even outside of taking just cheap prizes like I've illustrated, there are cards out there that do more damage based on certain Pokemon being in play. Think of something like the Gallade that we just looked at in this set review, or even the Golisopod that came out back in Darkness Ablaze. Both those cards do more damage for the different Pokemon V and or GX that are on your opponent's field. And up until now, those cards have been kind of awkward because your opponent can easily sort of play around that strategy. But between Echoing Horn and things like Mawile GX, I don't know, maybe there is a reason to potentially try to revisit some of those strategies. But yeah, Echoing Horn, slam dunk of a card. This thing is great. It's not going to be like a 4 of in every deck, but I fully expect to have this card used against me from time to time and be furious when it happens. So yeah, definitely a good card. Next up, we have Expedition Uniform. This is an item that says look at the bottom 3 cards from your deck and place them on top of your deck in any order. So I'll say just kind of another weak trainer card that we're looking at here overall. Very similar to something like Rotom Phone. Of course, the reach isn't quite as deep as Rotom Phone, but I think the trade-off that is being hinted at here is that, hey, if your opponent Marnies you and puts some of those important cards at the bottom of your deck, you can put those back on top, then use something like an Oranguru or a Crobat, etc. to draw the card that just got put at the bottom of your deck. How often is getting the card from bottom of your deck going to matter? I'm not really sold on that, to be honest. Even if they do go to the bottom of your deck, there's plenty of ways to just rearrange the order of your deck by playing other good cards already, like Quick Ball, just as an example. So it's an interesting card, guys, but if I'm playing something like this, I think I'm sticking with Rotom Phone. Next up, we have a new single strike supporter that is going to be Flannery. This says choose a special energy card attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon in any stadium card in play and discard them. So Flannery is kind of the next iteration in a long line, or I don't know if I'd consider it long, but in a line of disruptive supporter cards that we've had over the years. I think the most notable ones are probably Faba and Xerosic. I think those kind of fill the same sort of role as Flannery here. And I actually do kind of see a world where this card could see play. I think the precedent has been set for these sorts of cards to do well in the past. Faba and Xerosic both have been featured in a number of different competitive decks over the years. Now, the big downside to Flannery compared to those cards, you don't have the option at getting rid of tool cards. But even still, getting rid of special energy was usually kind of the big draw to those other supporters to begin with, and we're only getting more and more solid special energy, which definitely bodes well for a card like this. Now, the big issue I have with Flannery, though, is the fact that unlike something like Xerosic, where we had Versus Seeker at the time to easily be able to reuse that card whenever we wanted, Flannery is going to be a little bit more awkward to find on the turns that you really want. Yes, I do know we have the Eldegoss V. Yes, I know we have the new Welcoming Lantern, but these cards really aren't as reliable as something of the past like Versus Seeker, just as an example. So even though my rating does show I have a little bit of caution when approaching this, I actually think this is still a pretty good card. And, if I had to bet money on it, I think this card probably will pop up at some point during its lifespan. Next up, we have Fog Crystal. Fog Crystal is an item card that says search your deck for a basic psychic Pokemon or psychic energy, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So this is almost an identical reprint of Netball, but just with psychic cards instead of grass. Netball was a fantastic card for the decks that could use it, and Psychic just kind of being a better type in general than Grass means Fog Crystal is even better. I mean, obviously, you guys see the big thing they're pushing with this set. Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX is definitely going to be one of the better cards emerging from this, and being able to play Fog Crystal to grab your Calyrex in the beginning of the game and in the mid game to be able to accelerate energy with your VMAX means this card is going to be good throughout the entirety of a game, not just when you're trying to get set up. And of course, you're more than welcome to play this in decks that aren't named Shadow Rider Calyrex as well. And I think this card actually could be especially good for single prize evolution decks as we get more and more psychic Pokemon. Just because I think evolution decks, especially like stage 2 decks, really don't like discarding cards. They typically don't have a whole lot of expendable resources in their deck. So maybe if some solid psychic stage 2 attacker pops up eventually, this actually could be a really good sort of search engine for a deck like that as well. So Fog Crystal, absolute slam dunk of a card. I think this is going to be one of the best trainer cards actually to come out of this set. Definitely pick yourself up a playset. Next up, we have a new Pokemon tool card. This is going to be Galarian Chestplate. It says, if the Pokemon this card is attached to has Galarian in its name, it takes 30 less damage from your opponent's attacks after applying weakness and resistance. Even though at a glance it does look very similar to something like Big Charm, the main difference is the fact that you can technically get repeated use out of Galarian Chestplate. Because if your opponent has to attack you twice to take a knockout, that's effectively 60 less damage. Whereas with Big Charm, if you want to think about it this way, you're effectively only really reducing 30. So I think this card's kind of balanced, but my issue with this is that there's really not too many tanky Galarian Pokemon. So ideally for a card like this to be successful, we would need there to be some sort of very tanky Galarian Pokemon VMAX that can tank a couple of hits, where Galarian Chestplate could potentially turn those 2 shots into 3 shots. I think that's where a card like this could potentially shine. I just think right now there's really just not a good partner for something like this. Yes, I do know we got Slowking in this set, so you might be thinking about that, but I don't think Slowking is good enough to really even build around, if I'm just being honest. So I don't think Galarian Chestplate is probably going to pop up as a result. But like I said, this is a card still may be worth having on hand as we get more and more Galarian Pokemon VMAX potentially. So yeah, for the moment, not a good card, but there is definitely a world where that could change. Next up, guys, we have 4 new Pokemon tool cards we're going to look at. They are all these different types of gloves that all kind of do the same thing, but for different types of Pokemon in the game. So depending on which of these you have attached to your Pokemon, any damage done to your opponent's active grass, dark, fire, or metal Pokemon is going to be increased by 30. So this is another one of these sort of selective buffing cards, kind of in the same vein as Struggle Gloves. You can see Creatures Inc. is really fighting the urge to just reprint something like Choice Band. It's trying to give us all these lesser, inferior versions of that in place of it. And yeah, I just don't think these are that great overall. I think a lot of the time, if you're thinking about playing one of these, Struggle Gloves is already kind of going to do the same thing. Like, more often than not, the Pokemon that you are playing these cards for to begin with are already going to be the ones that hit you for weakness. But to be fair, that's not always the case, and I think there are certain situations that I will at least point out where these could be a little bit better than something like Struggle Gloves. There might be decks that you don't have a good matchup against, but they might not be decks that hit you for weakness. Like, let's say one of your poorer matchups is going to be Zacian variants. Like, let's say you're a deck that is two-shot oriented, but you only cap out around 190, 200 damage. Well, hey, if that's the case, play something like Crushing Gloves. That could potentially fix that matchup to where you can now take one-shots on those Zacians, even though it might not be an attacker that you're weak to. So yeah, these are a little bit different than Struggle Gloves, but I still think they are far too situational to really see any meaningful amount of play. Gonna be a pass from me. Next up, we have another supporter card called Honey. This is actually a card Japan has had for what feels like forever now, but we are finally getting it. It says, draw a card for each Pokemon V on your opponent's bench. I think outside of going against something like Eternatus, this card is just super weak. A lot of the times this is basically just going to be a draw 3, but especially if you ever open with a card like this card is horrible in the early portions of the game, and your opponent can play around it. It's just not reliable enough to really take up spots in your deck. So maybe if this was Pokemon V in play and not just bench, maybe I'd be a little bit more generous, but I think right now, Honey is not going to do a whole lot for you in a lot of games. Next up, guys, we have Karen's Conviction. This is a new single strike supporter card that says, during this turn, your single strike Pokemon's attacks do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon for each prize card your opponent has already taken. So this is actually kind of a spiritual successor to the old Iris card back during the Plasma era of the game. But this has actually seen a pretty good buff. Iris, I think, was only plus 10. This is a plus 20. But of course, the downside to Karen here is it is limited to only single strike Pokemon. But if we just run through the math here, if your opponent has taken 5 prize cards, you're doing plus 100 for turn, which is definitely nothing to scoff at all. So of course we have the new Cinderace that we looked at earlier in this set review that this kind of pairs with nicely to do insane late game damage. But I think there are situations, even outside of that of course, where Karen could be worth playing. This card just really comes down to what are the numbers that your deck needs to hit, and does Karen change that for the matchups that you're worried about in any sort of meaningful way. Even though Iris wasn't the most popular supporter card during its time, it did see play, and single strike Pokemon are sort of geared around taking big one shots. So I think there is a world where Karen's Conviction is going to pop up throughout its lifespan. As you can see, I am going to be a little bit more neutral on it. This card is not a draw supporter, which means it is going to be awkward to find turns where you can play this card. It is kind of an awkward supporter, but I do think it could pop up. So yeah, going to remain a little bit on the middle in this one. Next up, we're taking a look at another new supporter card. This one is going to be Clara. It says, choose up to 2 Pokemon and up to 2 basic energy from discard pile, show them to your opponent, and put them into your hand. So if the text of this card sounds a little familiar, it should. This is basically just Ordinary Rod in the form of a supporter card. But the big upside to Clara compared to Ordinary Rod, of course, is that you just get these cards immediately back in your hand and you don't have to go digging through your deck with things like Professor's Researches or Quick Balls to find all those cards you just shoved back in your deck. But this being a supporter makes this card so slow and is really going to stifle this card's potential playability. Now, with that being said, just to play devil's advocate, we have seen quite a few supporter-based recovery cards actually see play throughout the years. You know, Brock's Grit is one of the better examples in recent memory. Even going back further than that, we had things like Flower Shop Lady, etc., etc. So there is precedent for these types of cards to see play. You know, one easy example where a card like Clara could be good is if we do enter a point in the format where item lock, for example, becomes very prevalent, and your typical recovery cards like your Ordinary Rods aren't going to be able to be played as easily. We actually saw this exact dynamic with Flower Shop Lady, actually. Back during its time, an item locking Vileplume was very popular, so a lot of decks that played Vileplume would play Flower Shop Lady as their form of recovery while being under item lock. So Clara very well could fill a role like that. I think another example where this card might have some utility is potentially even an Eternatus VMAX, which might sound a little bit random, but the reason I cite Eternatus in particular is because we're getting more and more tech cards for Eternatus, things like Path to the Peak that we're going to cover a little bit later in this set review are going to probably naturally limit its bench size, and a card like Clara, or maybe even Ordinary Rod to be fair, could be a good card for a deck like that, just to get some Pokemon back on your bench. And with Eternus playing so many copies of Crobat, being able to Clara for maybe an Eternus plus a Crobat V means you can still draw cards for turn potentially as well. So as you can tell by my tone here, I think there's some good things about Clara. I think there's some bad things about it. It being a supporter does mean this card is extremely, extremely slow, and it means you're not playing cards like Professor's Research, Marnie, Boss's Orders, etc. But at the same time, I think there is a niche that could emerge where Clara could see some play, so I'm going to land a little bit neutral on this one. Next up, we're taking a look at, I think, at one of the standout cards of this set. That is going to be Melanie. Melanie is a supporter card that says attach a water energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon V, then draw 3 cards. This is effectively kind of a slightly nerfed version of Welder, but for water Pokemon. And you guys don't need me to tell you how good Welder has been up until this point. It's been one of the most impactful cards we've had ever since it has been released. And Melanie does look to be also a pretty good follow-up to Welder, even if it's not quite as strong. Now, one thing that might look a little bit awkward about this card is that it's only limited to Pokemon V. And while I agree with that, I am also kind of happy in a way, because it being limited to just Pokemon V means you can't go attach metal energy to ADP, Melanie Water, turn 1 altered creation. So it is kind of good that they did that, but I do kind of wish that instead of limiting it to just Pokemon V, they would have simply excluded Pokemon GX. I think that would have been a much better balancing measure for this card. It still makes it so that ADP can't use this turn 1, but also it still allows single prize cards to be able to use this, which really shouldn't be cards that get excluded from such an effect like this. But in terms of the actual viability of this card and the decks that could use it, I mean, I think this card is kind of a slam dunk. You know, if you are, for example, maybe a Lapras VMAX deck, I think you might still use traditional things like Frostmoth to get powered up. But you know, if you're a card like the new Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX, or maybe even Inteleon VMAX, where you don't really need a ton of energy in play, you just kind of need 2, maybe sometimes 3, and you just need to cheat an extra energy attachment from time to time, I think Melanie fills a great role for decks like that. And of course, much like with Welder, we do have to remember we can attach this energy to any of our Pokemon. It doesn't have to be water Pokemon or fire in the case of Welders. So even as we get more and more colorless Pokemon, once Welder rotates, Melanie could still be a nice way at cheating some extra attachments in play throughout the course of a game. Now, I do think the big issue with Melanie, though, is that it does have to accelerate energy from discard pile, which sometimes might make using Melanie in the early portions of the game a little bit more tricky than it otherwise would be with something like Welder. But even with that being said, I think this is a very strong card, and it's going to give water decks another potential good energy accelerator to put in their toolbox of acceleration methods they have right now. So Melanie, I think this is a very solid card overall. Definitely expecting this one to see some play. Next up, we have a new stadium. This is going to be Old Cemetery. It says whenever a player attaches an energy from their hand to one of their Pokemon, excluding Psychic Pokemon, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. So I'm a big fan of Old Cemetery here. I think actually in the short term, I'm not like super sold on this card overall, but I think long term, I think this card is really solid. This is actually kind of effectively a pseudo reprint of Frozen City all the way back from the Team Plasma era, which was a stadium card that did the same thing, but it excluded Team Plasma Pokemon, whereas this excludes Psychic type. Being able to cheat some extra damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon from time to time is going to be the difference between setting up a 1-shot or a 2-shot. And actually, I mean, we've seen over the years where a lot of times you kind of don't mind putting damage counters on your own Pokemon. You know, think of a card like Spiritomb just as an easy example that we still have in standard format. That's a card that does more damage for every damage counter that is currently on it. And since a card like that isn't Psychic type, it could make use of something like Old Cemetery to cheat some additional counters on itself. In terms of Psychic decks that might want to abuse Old Cemetery, I think Dragapult VMAX would be one of the better contenders in the short term. I know we're getting Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX in the set, so I think a lot of people might naturally sort of gravitate to trying to include that in there, but I really don't think this has synergy with Calyrex, even though this is kind of being pushed in the same set as it. Another example where I think this card actually might be decent is going to be in single prize decks where their HP is largely irrelevant. So think of a deck like the Salazzle deck or Mad Party or something kind of along those lines where your Pokemon already naturally have kind of low HP totals and they're going to be knocked out no matter what your opponent attacks with as is. Decks like that could in theory think about running something like Old Cemetery as kind of like a pseudo Shrine of Punishment to get in some more damage. I think that's another use for this, so I think this is a pretty versatile card overall, and I'd be pretty surprised if it didn't eventually see some play. So I'm going to go out on a limb, stand beside Old Cemetery. Definitely one of the trainer cards I like a little bit more from this set. Next up, we have Path to the Peak, another card I am elated to see come out here in Chilling Reign. This is a stadium that says each player's Pokemon in play with a rule box has no abilities. Absolutely amazing stadium card. This is basically a direct upgrade from Power Plant that we still have in the current format right now. But of course, this is expanded not only to include Pokemon EX and GX like Power Plant, but also the new Pokemon V and VMAX. And actually, I guess if you want to get technical, this even goes a little bit further to show off abilities of Prism Star Pokemon, Pokemon Break, etc. So this actually is a stadium with much further reaching effects than Power Plant. Power Plant was the backbone of so many decks during its time. We saw a lot of Greens decks play Power Plant as their stadium of choice. Really any deck that isn't reliant on a multi-prize draw engine. And we now suddenly have a really good way at shutting off a lot of these Pokemon V abilities that have largely been going unchecked up until this point. Think of something like Eternatus VMAX, being able to just smack down the stadium card. They now have to discard their bench down to 5 Pokemon, which might even force Eternatus to start playing some form of Pokemon recovery in their deck, since largely up until now, they haven't had to deal with a whole lot of bench disruption. This is also, of course, going to show off things like Crobat V, Eldegoss V, Kricketune V, etc. And if a card like Shadow Rider Calyrex does end up catching on after Chilling Reign, they are going to have to contend with a card like this. Now, for the moment, we do still have Chaotic Swell in play. I think that's really the only thing that's going against Path to the Peak, making it a little bit difficult to sometimes stick this thing in play to really have it disrupt your opponent for a long period of time. But nevertheless, this card is amazing. I think definitely one of the best cards to come out of Chilling Reign. Make sure you get yourselves a playset. Next up, we have a new support card. This is going to be Peonia, and it says choose up to 3 of your prize cards and put them into your hand, then place the same number of cards from your hand face down as prize cards. So one thing we've actually kind of lacked right now in the current format for a little bit is a way of manipulating our prize cards effectively. And even though most decks out there aren't really too worried about what their specific prize cards are, there's a lot of decks where just prizing one particular thing can really be their downfall. So I think right now, one of the better examples of decks that would really appreciate this is going to be control decks. I think this is actually an auto 1 of or an auto 2 of in basically any control deck that pops up from here on out, just because control decks aren't generally going to take prizes, and those 6 cards they lay out at the beginning of the game are basically going to always be there. And if you prize something kind of important, you're not going to have access to that guaranteed for the entire game. So Peonia is a fantastic way at maybe being able to mitigate those sorts of situations. Also, we've seen other decks like Night March of the past, which is kind of similar to the Mad Party deck that we have now, play things like Town Map, because if they prize certain Night Marchers, then that impacts their total damage cap. I think theoretically, Mad Party could consider this for basically the same reason. So as a result, I kind of have to upvote this card. It's just kind of the best way we have at manipulating our prize cards, and the fact that we get to draw 3 in the process isn't bad, especially when we look at some of these older cards I've been talking about. They gave you no such effects, so not only are you getting to change your prize cards, but you also get to draw a few cards per turn as well, which I think gives Peonia potentially some legs to be used in other decks that aren't control decks as well. And since we just looked at Peonia, you guys can imagine we are next going to look at Peony. This is another supporter card, but this one says discard your hand and search your deck for 2 trainer cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Then shuffle your deck. So Peony, this is actually, it kind of reminds me of a hybrid between Green's Exploration and Professor's Research in a way. Obviously, in the case of Green's Exploration, you get 2 trainer cards, and with Professor's Research, you have to discard your hand, so kind of a mixture of the two, but without the downside of Green's where you can't have Pokemon with abilities in play. And even though you're just discarding your hand for 2 cards, I don't think this is as major of a downside as you might expect, and let me explain why. Just because if you're playing a Professor's Research, you're probably discarding your hand in an attempt to hit 1 or 2 specific cards anyways. So Peony is basically just saying, hey, you're not going to get all of the extra fluff that you would get with Research, but you can guarantee yourself the exact 2 cards that you want to see. And with this having other cards in the format still, like Kricketune V, Silvally GX, Rose Tower, etc., I don't even think the harsh discard is even going to be that impactful, just because with these other cards, you can refill your hand size and ensure that you can keep drawing cards to be able to do more actions on your turn. I've seen some people talk about potentially using this as a way at setting up your stage 2 decks a little bit better. However, I am a little bit skeptical of that, even though in theory it does kind of make sense because you can discard your hand, go for Evolution Incense, Rare Candy, get out your stage 2. I don't think stage 2 decks like heavy discarding cards, so I'm not super sold on that. But I think just really any combo reliant deck, especially ones that don't mind certain things being put in the discard, are going to love something like this. So actually, ADP has probably been the best example the community has been talking about for Peony, because you can play things like Dedenne GX, Crobat V, and then still end your turn with something like Peony, where you can guarantee maybe like Metal Saucer Energy Switch to get off the turn 1 alter creation. So Peony definitely seems like it makes sense in a deck like that. But there's other decks out there too, like Mad Party, just as an example, where if you were able to, you would probably play like 6 or 7 Professor's Research in your deck if you had the choice. And since you can't, I think Peony could be a solid 1 to 2 of in decks kind of like that like certain cards in the discard pile. So yeah, I'm actually really excited to see what the community as a whole comes up with for this card. I think this has some really insane combo potential, especially like I said, since we do have other cards like Kricketune, Rose Tower, etc. to refill our hand after we do get these 2 trainer cards. So even though this isn't my favorite card from the set, I do think this card is still a pretty solid supporter overall. And like I said, I'm just pretty excited to see how this thing eventually gets used. Next up, guys, we have Rapid Strike Scroll of the Skies. This is going to be a new Pokemon tool card that gives Rapid Strike Pokemon another alternate attack they could potentially use. So if this is attached to a Rapid Strike Pokemon, it gains the Flying Suplex attack for a Lightning and Colorless, does 10 plus 50 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Now, as you guys can tell by my rating, though, I'm not super stoked on this overall. Putting aside the fact that Rapid Strike energy actually won't provide the energy for this attack, I think the other big downside is that there's not a whole lot of Pokemon that are attacking with a ton of energy. I think Scorch VMAX and maybe the new Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX are going to be one of the only examples where they might have 3 or more energy attached to them. But most of their cards right now, I think, are only going to be hovering around 2-ish. Think of something like Rapid Strike Urshifu. It attacks for 1 to 3 energy, and it discards its energy when it uses it. Eternus only uses 2 energy. So I think just kind of overall, this attack doesn't really hit for the numbers that I kind of want it to. So we'll have to keep our eyes peeled on this card. You never know. If there is an attacker that comes along that is reliant on putting a ton of energy onto itself, this could actually be a decent tool card for Rapid Strike decks. But I just don't see what matchup you are really helping by playing something like this. I really don't think it's doing any favors for our Rapid Strike cards out there. Next up, we have another Pokemon tool card. This is going to be Rugged Helmet. It's an item, and it says, when the Pokemon this card is attached to is your active Pokemon and is damaged by an opponent's attack, choose an energy attached to the attacking Pokemon and return it to your opponent's hand. So this is a super annoying card that we have here, and really does pair nicely with a couple of other cards floating around right now. So of course you could play this in control decks that are built around denying your opponent's energy and controlling their resources. I think that's definitely a possibility. I think also Inteleon VMAX might even be one of the better options as well. In conjunction with Inteleon's first attack that returns another energy to their hand, this could really set your opponent back and attack from time to time. And even though you're just returning the energy to your opponent's hand and not discarding it, I really don't think that even matters. I think what matters here is being able to force your opponent to keep committing resources to a Pokemon that is already more than likely damaged in the active, and not being able to put those resources on fresh attackers on the bench. So obviously this, in conjunction with other disruption cards like Crushing Hammer and Team Yell Grunt as well, really just compound how annoying this card is. Now, of course, the big downside to this card is the fact that it is going to be largely a kind of passive tool card. It's reliant on your opponent making certain actions and not yourself. So that means your opponent can play something like a Tool Scrapper and get around this. They can play a Boss's Orders or Escape Rope. But even with that being said, I still really like this card, especially if your opponent's not playing a bunch of tool removal and they're forced to attack into a Pokemon with this multiple times. Man, that's a pretty good spot to be in, especially with the amount of decks out there that are reliant on multiple manual attachments. Of course, think of something like Eternus VMAX. I think that's going to be one of the better examples that we have right now. Dragapult VMAX, etc. So yeah, big fan of Rugged Helmet. I hope I never play against this card, but nevertheless, it is, I think, a pretty powerful effect that we have. Next up, we have a new Rapid Strike supporter, and that is going to be Seabold. It says choose up to 2 of your Rapid Strike Pokemon in play and heal 60 from each of them. So at this point, we actually do have a good bit of healing cards in the format right now. Of course, we have basic things like Potion, but we also have Hyper Potion, Cheryl, Malulana, etc. So Seabold really does have a lot to sort of contend with for deck space if you're a deck that is contemplating some sort of healing option. Now, granted, there are some exceptions, but I'd say overall, I think healing 60 only kind of matters when you're healing from Pokemon VMAX. Just because, of course, the single prize Rapid Strike cards and the multi-prize Rapid Strike cards are more than likely just going to get one-shot by anything anyways. VMAXs are tanky enough to where the 60 heal could theoretically make a difference. But I think it's still just not quite enough. Maybe if this was like heal 80, maybe that would get us a little bit closer to where I want us to be. But I think overall, I'm just going to keep playing cards like Malulana or Cheryl, especially if we think of something like Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX, which already discards its energy when it attacks anyways. A card like Cheryl or Malulana just makes a lot more sense. They allow you to heal a lot more damage with little to no downside, really. So Seabold, this card overall just feels kind of weak. I'm really not expecting us to see any play at all. Next up, we have a new tool for Single Strike Pokemon that is going to be Single Strike Scroll of Piercing. If this is attached to a Single Strike Pokemon, gives them a new attack, and this one for a Fire and 2 colorless is 120, and this attack's damage isn't affected by weakness, resistance, or any other effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So in a vacuum, I think this attack seems pretty neat. This now gives your Pokemon a way at getting through some of those annoying cards out there like the Decidueye, Zamazenta V, etc. that would normally block their damage. I have quite a few issues with this, as you can tell by the rating I have assigned this card. The first one, of course, is the fact that it takes fire energy to get powered up. That means Houndoom can't power up this attack, which is already a strike against it. And just in general, there's really not too many good fire single strike Pokemon currently. I know we're getting the new Volcanion V, but I don't think that card is particularly great, I have to confess. So if you want to get through some of these wall Pokemon that are running around, the two I just mentioned are actually weak to fire as well, which means that you can just play other things like Volcanion from Unbroken Bonds, just as an easy example, if you want to deal with these cards I just mentioned. So that's already, I think, a really big issue for this card. But also, too, thinking about the best single strike cards we have, I think Urshifu VMAX is debatably the best one right now. And guess what? Urshifu VMAX actually can hit through any of these weird effects your opponent might have on them that would otherwise prevent or reduce your damage. And even outside of Single Strike Urshifu, Houndoom already isn't like an awful way at dealing with some of these Pokemon. So yeah, just really interesting choice for how they designed this card. I just really don't think Single Strike cards want or need this card in any capacity, if I'm just being totally honest. So yeah, big thumbs down for me. And for our final trainer card, we have Welcoming Lantern. This is an item card that says choose a Single Strike supporter card from your discard pile and put it into your hand. This is definitely a type of card I can get on board with. This is basically Versus Seeker, but just for single strike supporter cards. Versus Seeker was one of the most widely played cards the last time it got printed. It was basically a 3 to 4 of in almost every deck. One of the things I like most about cards like Versus Seeker is that they really do help enable 1 and 2 of supporters be more viable, because a lot of the time they are hard to find on the turns that you need them, and being able to play these items that allow you the flexibility of grabbing any supporter you might want means that you're going to have more chances to play them throughout the course of a game. So I really do like Welcoming Lantern for that type of reason. That's going to help cards like the new Karen's Conviction we just looked at maybe be able to see a little bit more play. But as you guys can tell by my rating, I don't think this is nearly as good as Versus Seeker, currently at least. So the reason I say that is we really just don't have too many good single strike supporter cards right now. I think the best two are actually going to be Bruno and Karen's Conviction. Both cards I think are pretty solid, but I mean, we just don't have enough single strike supporter cards to base an entire draw engine around. I think we're really going to need one more solid single strike supporter, and then I think Welcoming Lantern just kind of takes off and the single strike draw engine kind of becomes a thing. But until then, I'm kind of hesitant to build around this style of engine. I just think it's missing one piece to the puzzle to be able to see play. So as you guys can tell, I am going to remain a little bit neutral on Welcoming Lantern. I think this is a card that has a ton of potential. Maybe the single strike Mustard sees play alongside these other ones and that's your engine. Who knows? But I think this card is definitely dripping with potential, and I'm definitely going to, at the very least, keep a playset on hand just in case. Next up, we have a new special energy. This is going to be Impact Energy. So this card can only be attached to a single strike Pokemon, and if this card is attached to anything other than a single strike Pokemon, discard this card. But as long as it is attached to a Pokemon, it provides every type of energy, but only provides one at the same time. And if this Pokemon is poisoned, it is no longer poisoned and cannot be poisoned. This is basically just Aurora energy without the discarding downside, plus an immunity to poison. That already is kind of decent. But as you guys can tell by my rating, I think this card has some big issues. I think the big one, of course, is the fact that Houndoom actually cannot accelerate this. So I know a lot of people initially thought that, but if you go and read Houndoom back from Battle Styles, the card that it accelerates is named Single Strike Energy, not an energy that is designated Single Strike like this. So that is a huge downside. Now, if this card gets an errata at any point where Houndoom is allowed to accelerate it, yeah, this card's viability immediately skyrockets. But for the moment, that's not the case, and we have to treat it as such. You know, if we're looking at most of the viable single strike cards right now, they are largely based around just kind of one type and maybe two types at the most. And usually in that case, Houndoom and Single Strike Energy provide both of those types. And even though the poison immunity is kind of okay, I don't think there's anything we really have to worry about right now that is poisoning things on kind of a widespread level. So I think just playing basic energy is going to be better most of the time than playing impact energy. You know, basic energy, it can be recovered with Ornate Rod, and I think a little bit more importantly, it is not susceptible to as much energy denial as something like impact energy. We still have things like Giratina and Fan of Waves running around that can more easily sort of discard these types of cards. And there's just nothing impact energy is offering to make it worth the extra susceptibility to energy denial. Again, maybe down the road, if we get some sort of single strike deck that is based around sort of like a large toolbox of different types of single strike attackers, I think impact energy does have a world where it could see some play. But right now, with most of the single strike decks being largely monotype, or at least the primary attacker of single strike decks being monotype, I just don't see a compelling argument to play this card right now. Big thumbs down for me, unfortunately, but if we ever do get an errata that allows Houndoom to accelerate this, I'll gladly change my tune. But just for the moment, I just don't see a world where this is a good card. Next up, guys, we have Lucky Energy. This is going to be a special energy that provides one colorless energy, and if the Pokemon this card is attached to is your active and is damaged by an opponent's attack, you get to draw one card. Even though I have opted to downvote this card, I don't think this is horrible per se. Just in general, non-supporter based draw is always sort of a good thing in the Pokemon TCG and always effects that we should take pretty seriously. But one of the issues I have with this card is the fact that we still have draw energy in the same format here, which is already a card that really doesn't see much play. But I kind of like draw energy overall a little bit more because draw energy allows you to draw when you attach it, helping you get set up. Now, I will say the trade-off to Lucky Energy, of course, is that it does sort of Marnie and reset proof your hand a little bit more. So I think that's not awful. And I will also just throw out there, if you guys are intent on playing this, obviously the big partner for this is going to be Porygon Z, especially if Porygon is accelerating these energies to something that can tank at least one hit. Because then you can get repeated use out of Lucky Energy, which in that case would make it slightly better than Draw Energy. But I'm still not convinced. We also had a card of the past like Lucky Helmet, and that saw virtually no play as well. So yeah, Lucky Energy, I actually don't think this is horrible, but I think the opportunities that this could potentially be used are just far too narrow for me to really get excited about it. And next up, guys, for the final card of our Chilling Reign set review today, we have Spiral Energy. So you guys can probably guess where this one is going. It's a new special energy only for Rapid Strike Pokemon, but with this one, as long as it is attached to a Rapid Strike Pokemon, this card provides every type of energy and only provides one at the same time. If this Pokemon is paralyzed, it is no longer paralyzed and cannot be paralyzed. So at a glance, this doesn't seem a whole lot different from Impact Energy. So you guys might be thinking, well, what's with the big rating disparity between the two? And really, there's two reasons why I think this card is a good bit better than its single strike counterpart. The first one is that we actually have a variety of different typed Rapid Strike cards that are viable. After Chilling Reign, we're going to have Rapid Strike Urshifu, Zeraora V, and or Blaziken VMAX all being played in some combination with one another. So Spiral Energy makes your deck a little bit more flexible in terms of who you want to power up instead of having to rely on a bunch of different types of basic energies. And also speaking of Blaziken, that's the other reason why I think this card is actually good, because thanks to Blaziken VMAX, you can actually accelerate Spiral Energy to your Pokemon. So as a result, I don't think we're quite as worried about special energy denial as we would be with Impact Energy. And I will also point out, even though most decks right now are playing for Switch, if we do go against a Pikarom deck and they try to go in with a Tandem Shock with their Raichu and Alolan Raichu GX, Spiral Energy, of course, will deny that paralysis as well. So yeah, I think this card is solid. It's not groundbreaking, nowhere near as good as Rapid Strike Energy, but I still think this is good enough to see play, especially if you are a Rapid Strike deck that is playing Blaziken VMAX in particular. Happy to have it in our toolbox of Rapid Strike cards. And with that, guys, as you can see, we finally made it to the end of our Chilling Reign set review. Big shout out to you guys for making it this far. I know these set reviews do tend to be a bit on the longer side, but I also really enjoyed these sort of deep dives into these cards and speculating on all of the potential of these new cards that we're about to get. And before we wrap up today's video, I just want to go over some of my final thoughts kind of as a whole on this new set. I think overall this is a very solid follow-up to Battle Styles by expanding on those respective toolboxes a little bit more, especially in the case of Rapid Strike Pokemon. They definitely get a nice buff from this set in particular. The next thing I like is that even though a lot of the trainer cards in the set are really bad, there are a handful of extremely impactful ones, whether it's Melanie, Path to the Peak, Fog Crystal, etc. I think there are a lot to still really get excited about that are drastically going to impact certain decks out there. And even though Pokemon VMAX are largely the star of the show in the Sword and Shield format, we actually had kind of a good mix of viable 2 and 3 prize attackers. Of course, we got both of the new Calyrex cards in terms of our VMAXs that are good, but we also have some 2 prizers with some potential coming out in the same set as well, like Zeraora V most importantly, and also some other cards like Burslie V that also have some potential as well. But in terms of things I don't like about this set, a lot of trainer cards, like I mentioned, are a little bit on the weaker side. And the special energies we got in this set are really kind of weak, especially when we compare them to the amazing energies that we just got back in Battle Styles. The new Impact and Spiral energies, nowhere near as good as the previous Rapid and Single Strike energies. And Lucky Energy also is kind of mediocre as well. So I think the set kind of did drop the ball in that regard. But as a whole, I'm still opting to give Chilling Reign a 4 out of 5. I think this is a stellar follow-up to Battle Styles. Kind of just expands on all the things that made that set so good. And that is definitely fine by me. But guys, I know we went over a ton of stuff today. I know some of my opinions are probably going to vary from yours, so definitely let me know down below in the comments section. What cards from the set are you going to be looking forward to? Are there any cards you thought I was a little too harsh on? Maybe some that I gave too much credit? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. But if you did enjoy this set review, of course, guys, smack that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on those notifications. That way you'll be up to date whenever my next Chilling Reign content is set to drop. And if you want to take your support to the next level, you can also become a patron at patreon.com/rarecandytcg or pick up some merch at rarecandytcg.com. It really does go a long way. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.